Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto has kurama progenitor bloodline. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Galactic Fractals and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. It was late at night, and the village hidden in the leaves seemed to be in its slumber. With all of its villagers hitting the hay, save a few, it seemed like Konohagakure was a ghost town. There were few leaf shinobi that were stationed at the main gates that were built into the village's enormous concrete walls. The calm still air suddenly ripened and thrashed around into mild and biting winds. Up on a hill that seemed to touch the full moon, stood two silhouetted figures whose shadows grew by the moon's eerie, yet beautiful light. One figure, if you looked up close, had his arms crossed as he stared down at the sleeping village with contempt. He had short, spiky red hair, with unusually long bangs and sharp, violet eyes. He wore a red Hittite one that had a maelstrom on it for its symbol. He also wore a long red scarf and red armor which composed of a breastplate, with 4 red plates protecting his legs that were attached to them, identical shoulder pads, and matching arm and leg guards. He also wore a black belt, where a pouch was attached that stored his weapons, and a sleek katana blade in his waist. He had a cigar in his mouth that he kept swishing around because of his itching impatience. The other figure was shorter than the previous one and had a slightly smaller build. He had beautifully pale skin and slightly droopy eyes that were looking at the village with calm, cool, and collective sea-green eyes. His hair was long and tied into a ponytail that stopped at his mid-back. His hair was semi-spiky and he had 2 long strands that framed his elfish face handsomely. His hair was colored silver and glimmered in the moonlight, as if white fire had set it aglow. He also wore similar samurai attire like his counterpart, but his uniform was colored white and he had dual blades strapped to his sides by a black cloth that hugged his waist. "This it?" the first figure said in a deep, gruff voice. By his voice, he did not sound pleased one bit. The second figure nodded, laying a single pale hand on one of his dual katana blades. "Yes, the Lord Daimyo has specifically said that this village is currently housing the Lost Prince." The first man turned towards his partner and grinned. His smile looked slightly frightening, as if he was itching for a fight. "And if anyone gets in our way, Masayoshi?" he asked. The newly dubbed Masayoshi sighed in an exasperated manner. "Akihiko, the Lord Daimyo has specifically instructed that we do not engage with any civilian or shinobi that are housed in the entirety of this village." Masayoshi berated the man Akihiko with an annoyed tone. "He doesn't want to cause any more trouble that there's going to be in the near future." Akihiko grunted before he took a deep swig of his cigar. He took it out, and that crazy smile of his returned, if only slightly. "Ah, come on, Masa. You and I both know that you want to burn this village to the ground just as much as I do." He raised a brow. "Or is it because of your girlishly body that you oh so desperately want to keep oh so perfect?" Masayoshi, or Masa for short, glared at his partner. The short man was considered to be very handsome by women because he almost looked like a woman as well. His porcelain skin was never scarred, his gorgeous long hair always silky smooth, and his sparkling eyes always remained soft and full of compassion for others, even towards his enemies. Towards the women, he was the perfect man; towards the men, he was just a pretty boy. "Very well then," the silvered-haired man growled as his grip on his katana blade tightened. He absolutely hated to be mocked. If anyone ever did besides Akihiko, well, let's just say they were going to be missing a few of their limbs when he was finished with them. "If they should attack us first, then we shall retaliate only in self-defense. You got that, Akihiko?" Masayoshi said, narrowing his sea-green eyes at his partner. The red-haired man looked at his friend with mock hurt. "Why, Masa, are you saying that you, my best friend, can't trust me?" "That is precisely what I am saying," was all he said before the short samurai warrior of the two began to bound off towards the village. "Ouch," Akihiko said before he chuckled and hopped away to catch up with his friend. 2 guards that were stationed out in front of the frontal main gates that lead into the Leaf Village were yawning tiredly as the slow and still night dragged on. They were bored, for night duty was the most tiresome missions the Chunin were assigned to do. As stated as their rank, Leaf Chunin were the best in their prime, for they had that feel of revelry and excitement that greatly influenced the village in many ways. But if they were stuck on night duty, the Sandaime Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, would have a lot of complaints once their shifts were over. "You see anything?" one guard asked the other. He was a male with a fair build, and he wore his Hittite securely on his forehead, the metal plate gleaming in the moonlight as the Leaf Village's insignia that was etched into had a beautiful glow to it. He also wore the standard Leaf Shinobi uniform, which consisted of a green flak jacket, dark navy blue pants, and blue shinobi sandals. The man had his head in his hand as they sat at their station's desk, and his eyes were drooping as sleep tried to overtake him. His partner was a female with long black hair, and had bags under her eyes from staying up so long. She also wore the standard attire, but she had black sandals and black pants. Her lips, which was coated elegantly in red lipstick, pursed in annoyance as her guarding companion asked the same question he had 12 times already. She should know, because she had been counting. It was the only thing to do on this boring night. The kunoichi, too, sighed before she grabbed the binoculars that were placed on their desk and held it up to her eyes. Her head would tilt from time to time, examining everything she could from the world outside of the village. Before she could report negative for the umpteenth time, she suddenly saw two mysterious figures walking down the road towards them, 5 meters away. What is it? The ninja asked. He saw his partner tense up when she focused on a particular spot for a longer examination than the other previous areas. Two suspicious characters 5 meters due north. The woman reported. In her binocular vision, the two figures suddenly vanished. She gasped. They've disappeared. We must warn. She stopped in mid-sentence when she heard a loud thump behind her. Fast as lightning, she whipped her head around to see two men dressed in red armor. The one with red hair and a smug grin on her face winked at her. The other one, who was much shorter than the first, held up one hand to her face. Sleep, was all he said before she felt her vision slip her, and the small nip of sleepiness she once felt suddenly washed over like a tsunami. Her knees wobbled before she staggered back and hit the station's walls with her backside. Her knees wobbled before they gave and she lay there, with her head hanging, as the sweet comfort of slumber overtook her. The last thing she remembered before she wasted away into unconsciousness was a painted eye that pulsed red on the silver-haired man's right hand. Masayoshi sighed in relief at his success. He had managed to subdue the two shinobi without them setting off the alarms or screaming for assistance. He turned his right hand over and stared at his palm. That eye on his hand wasn't painted, it was a mark that was forever burned on his hand. But that story would be for another day, A/N, or in this case, another chapter. His marked eye pulsed one more time before it cooled and faded away. Masayoshi narrowed his eyes. He knew it would come back if he applied chakra into it, but the man never liked to use it for reasons not many people knew. The dashing young man was brought out of his reminiscences when a hand clapped against his back. Hard. Ha ha ha. Nice work, Masa. Those bumbling leaf idiots had no idea what they were in for. Those fools, Akihiko said with a large grin stretching upon his lips. Masa just raised a brow. I have no comprehension of why it is that you make fun of the leaf shinobi. Your sister was a leaf shinobi here as well, yet you do not think of her to be an idiot. No. That made Akihiko clamp his mouth shut. His sister was named Kushina Uzumaki. After their homeland, the village hidden in the whirlpools, had gotten destroyed, the two were separated from the panic of the attack. Akihiko was lucky and had managed to find his family, and the others and rebuilt the nation again, but he had seen or heard of no hind or tail of his beloved younger sister. Years had passed and Akihiko had grown into a young teen before he became a strong male adult. During those years, the samurai was in a deep and spiraling depression over the loss of his younger sister all those years ago. But when his father, the daimyo of their homeland, had received news from their spy network that Kushina was alive and well, Akihiko was happy beyond belief. He was so happy that he cried for 3 whole days. He asked if he could go fetch her, and his father said yes, but after 2 months. Just as he was about to go aboard the ships and round up his men to bring the lost princess back home, a messenger had come and told him of Kushina's death, and this one was real. Akihiko demanded the assassin who had murdered his kin, and the messenger had shakily told him that it was the Kyubi no Yoko, or called the Nina-tailed fox, that had killed the woman. The redhead male was devastated and went back into his depressive state again. He had even taken up new habits which were drinking and smoking. It was only then that his best friend Masayoshi, or formerly known as Masayoshi Tanaka, managed to bring him out of his funk. The two men had been best friends since their early childhood, and did almost everything together. It affected Masa just as much as it had done Akihiko. Kushina was a very important person in their lives. Akihiko, his one and only sister, Masayoshi, his first love, A/N. Kushina didn't know that Masa had fallen in love with her. It was more of a one-sided thing. But they received news from Akihiko's father 4 years later that Kushina had had a son named Naruto Uzumaki. Both friends demanded the name of the father, Akihiko for information of his new nephew and Kushina's legacy, and Masa for information on who it was who had stolen his love away from him. The daimyo told them that it was a man named Minato Namikaze, and the two men were hushed with shocked silence. They knew of the name of Minato Namikaze, how could they not? That man was rumored everywhere in all surrounding 5 shinobi nations. He was called Konoha's Yellow Flash, the Yondaime Hokage, and in some rare cases he was called the Child of Prophecy. But the most important and spellbinding title the man had was the Savior of the World. The man had also won a ton of respect over in Akihiko's hometown. When the redhead had asked where the man was now, his father had responded that the extraordinary man had died. The two samurai were shocked and they immediately asked why. The daimyo had said that he had fought alongside Kushina when she was fighting the Kyubi. Minato had managed to seal the demon away into a newborn babe, but he died after the process, lying by Kushina's side with peaceful smiles on their faces. Those words alone made Akihiko tear up and Masa's tears rolled down his cheeks softly as he looked at the ground with an empty stare. And when Akihiko asked his father one final question of who was the person that was the Kyubi's next Jinchuriki, the old man sighed before he said, Naruto Uzumaki. Akihiko breathed out, before he puffed out a ring of smoke out of his mouth. Akihiko, Masayoshi drawled out in slight annoyance, you did not answer my earlier question. Yeah. The redhead grunted dismissively as he waved a sluggish hand around in the air. Kushi's no idiot, I assure you, but I never got her sense of home though, he said as he looked inside the village and at its buildings with a sneer. Indeed. Masa said before he began to walk ahead of the tall man with soft, graceful steps. Akihiko followed after him, his hand on his katana blade and his grip on the hilt loose and lazy, and his steps loud and hard. Hey Masa, Akihiko said after a long moment of comfortable silence. The man didn't say anything, but Akihiko knew he was listening. You know about Naruto's status, don't you? The silver-haired man inclined his head to his partner, who was looking straight ahead with a serious expression etched on his face. Masayoshi looked straight ahead with his eyes turning serious as well. Of course I do. Our entire platoons and majority of the villagers back home were due. Why do you ask, Batosai? The powerful man chuckled at the title. Back in his home village and majority of the West, Akihiko Uzumaki was known as the batosai, or manslayer for short. The reason being, he was the leading general of the entirety of his village's samurai unit, and during his depressive state of his sister's fake and real death, Akihiko still had to carry out missions, excruciatingly hard missions, that no other samurai took because majority of them seemed like the person whoever went on them would never return. But Akihiko and Masayoshi took them on a regular basis. When he was depressed and still mourning over his sister, his heart became cold and steeled itself, so no more pain and suffering would be inflicted upon it. On these missions, there was a lot of assassination missions. And Akihiko didn't care one bit. With his heart locked away, he became a killing machine throughout the western and southeastern elemental nations. He always succeeded and completed his missions, but he would always return home with blood-stained clothes and armor and a katana that was covered in red and dripped a path of blood as he dragged it along on the ground. Some called him the Red Death, some called him the Shinigami, himself but in a human form, but everyone knew him as the dreaded batosai of the Whirlpool nation. Oh, so we're calling each other by our titles now, huh? Akihiko grinned. Well then, Hidokiri for Masayoshi, what do you think I mean? Akihiko was not the only one of the duo that had a well-known title that was fear amongst the nations. Whenever he and Akihiko went on very dangerous, or S-class missions, Masayoshi used stealth and tactics rather than Akihiko's brute force style. The silver-haired man was known throughout the West as Hidokiri, or the skilled assassin for short. Masa's moves were swift and quick and he cut down his enemies in a matter of seconds. If he was ever facing shinobi, which was majority of the times, he would sometimes cut them down with a single blow, and leave them to bleed to death without even casting their jutsus. But the most mystifying but disturbing part about him and his skills was that when he came back home from an assassination mission, there was no speck of blood on his armor of clothes whatsoever. Masayoshi sighed and shook his head before his gaze suddenly turning serious. I think that what you were previously stating was what I thought of the lost Prince Naruto's title as Jinchuriki, were you not? Akihiko grunted but didn't say anything. Masayoshi just gave a hollow smirk at his response. I think that the young prince's tenant will be very beneficial to him. It will aid him in his… Damn it, Masa, that's not what I meant. The red-headed man growled as he rounded on his partner in bubbling rage. The smaller man just looked at him with unflinching eyes, not the least bit terrified of his friend's increasing anger. I mean what you really feel about him being Jinchuriki. Like feel. Masayoshi went silent, still staring at his friend with his face gone impassive. It was a full 5 minutes before he spoke once again. I think it is, as you say it, cool, he remarked, putting emphasis on the word cool. I see it as the lost prince having a gift rather than a curse that he just needs to learn how to control. All of our men think so, and majority of the villagers back in the Whirlpool nation, who know of it, feel the same way as well. Rest assured, Prince Naruto will be seen as a hero, not a demon. With that said, the batosai felt much more at ease as they strolled in the shadows of the Leaf Village. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding in. They accept him, Akihiko thought as he felt a smile tug at his lips. Good, now Naruto will be fully accepted into his real home with no problem. He suddenly felt an arm stop him from proceeding forward. It was Masayoshi, and the man was in a slightly crouched position as he stared at something with hawk-like eyes. Curious, the redhead followed his best friend's gaze and locked onto a group of men, no more than 5 or 6, crowd around together holding sharp objects. Looks like they're going out on a hunt, Akihiko thought, staring at the men lazily. Something clicked, and the powerful man was on guard in an instant. Or on a fox hunt. It only confirmed his suspicions when he tuned into the men's conversation. You guys all set? One asked as he held a pitchfork in an iron-tight grip. Yeah, one replied, twiddling his dagger impatiently in his hands. Let's just hurry up and kill that Uzumaki brat and be done with it. We just can't go barging in the orphanage like barbarians. We'll have to be subtle about it. Yeah, it'll do everyone good once that demon brat is wiped out from the face of the earth forever. The men all cheered while Akihiko and Masa both growled in anger. Akihiko's cigar was snapped in two, one piece hitting ground first before he spat out the other, and Masa's eyes hardened as he gripped his dual katana blades with both hands. Akihiko, Masayoshi said quietly. Yeah, I heard. The dangerous man said as he started to slow walk towards the men. Masa, you go get the kid and go see the Hokage, I'll take care of the trash. Masayoshi stared at his partner as the man started to steady gain closer towards his prey. The redhead drew out his katana blade and it gleamed in the moonlight. Akihiko's katana blade was beautifully crafted with a black and red hilt with tidbits of gold vines wrapping around it, and the blade was black with a red underbelly. Masa sighed at his reckless companion. Hi, batosai. He whispered as he kneeled down on one knee and a fist was placed firmly to the ground. Some things will never change, the short man thought before he vanished into the night in a haze of sweet-smelling mist. Who the hell are you? One man shouted from the earlier group of men. They raised their pitchforks and other sharp weapons at the intruder. A man with red hair and wearing red armor had suddenly come up to them as he was dragging a weirdly designed sword on the ground. Oh, just a passerby is all, he said in a dark and slightly disturbing voice. All of the men knew that there was something off about this red-headed man. They just couldn't put their finger on it. I hear you guys are going on a hunt, that true? The newcomer suddenly said out of the blue. Yeah, we're going to go kill that demon brat once and for all. A man shouted with his subordinates, murmuring in agreement. The ginger just tilted his head to the side in curiosity. Demon brat, you mean that Naruto Uzumaki kid? Exactly. That boy has been causing nothing but trouble with his pranks and grief by his mere existence. The man with the pitchfork shouted. He suddenly blinked and pointed a finger at him. Wait, you're new here, right? The newcomer nodded slowly. How do you know about the demon brat? The redhead man smiled a dark and twisted smile. It was as if bucket loads of wickedness had suddenly befallen him as he rolled of a suffocating wash of killer intent towards the rioting men. He suddenly lifted his sword high in the air as his smile grew more warped. Because that demon brat, as you call him, is my nephew. The men cowered against each other in fear as the sword-wielding maniac started taking slow but menacing steps towards them. Their screams could be heard throughout the night until they came to an abrupt end and silence once again filled the air. Akihiko wiped a large blotch of blood that was splattered against his cheek. He stared at the 6 deformed bodies on the ground. Gallons of blood continuously flowed from their corpses and soaked their clothing. Akihiko rummaged in his pockets under his armor until he took out another cigar and a match. He scraped the match against his breastplate and lit his cigar. Akihiko looked at his lit match and the bodies down below. With a shrug and a sigh, he threw the match at the bleeding corpses and they immediately set fire. That way there'll be no evidence of my doing, he thought as he turned on his heel and began to walk towards the Hokage tower, not caring in the least as the fire continued to spread and licked at the building's walls that it came across. Oh well, he smirked as he stuffed his hands back into his pockets. Looks like I'm gonna be at the Hokage tower first and Masa. In more ways than one he looked back to see people waking from their slumber and gathering around the fire, screaming and panicking as they did so. He also saw some Leaf Village A and B started to make their way over to the commotion and quickly hosed down the fire with their water. Jutsu. Che. Idiots. Akihiko grumbled before his body started to waver and flicker, and then he disappeared into thin air, as if he had never existed. A keeper of the Konohagakure orphanage was checking off marks on a clipboard as she examined each and every of the slumbering orphans. She was about to walk out of one of the sleeping quarters to the next one until she saw a handsome man in white armor standing in front of the only exit. She blushed when she saw his beautiful sea greens focus on her with scrutiny. And may I help you, sir? The woman stammered as she unconsciously tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The man was silent for a moment before he began to walk towards her with soft steps. Click. Clack. Click. Clack. His footsteps echoed throughout the room with an eerie and slightly disturbing sound. The keeper heard warning bells go off in the back of her skull, but she ignored it as her attention was captured by the beautiful creature that was now standing in front of her. Yes, you can, he said in a husky voice. The woman's heart thundered loudly in her chest as her knees began to wobble uncontrollably. I am looking for a boy with blonde hair and 3 whisker marks upon each of his cheeks. Do you know who he is? The woman stopped her swooning for a moment to scowl at the man. You want Naruto Uzumaki? That good-for-nothing troublemaker? Surely you aren't serious, sir? The man sighed before he tilted her chin up with a long, slender, and pale finger. His eyes softened into a sultry gaze before his thin lips smiled, showing off his perfectly pearly white teeth. Yes, my sweet. Do you know as to where I can find the young boy? He cooed as he scratched under her gently with his finger. The woman instantly started to swoon over the man as her previous disgust was washed away instantaneously. Tiny hearts were in her eyes as she started to squirm shyly in place. Why, yes sir, he is just down the hall at sleeping quarters A, which is located on the left. The silver-haired man smiled at her charmingly, making her squeal with delight. Thank you very much for your assistance. I'm afraid I will not need you now. She looked at him curiously and began she could ask what he meant. His hand suddenly lashed out and grabbed her face. A weird marking on that hand pulsed, and she instantly fell into unconsciousness. Masayoshi sighed as he gently picked up the woman and placed her against the wall next by a bed that a messy brunette orphan was currently occupying. The samurai straightened up and made his way towards his next destination. Sleeping quarters letter A. This is going all according to plan, Masa thought, albeit a little skeptically. A little too well. The man turned into the designated place and saw another room filled with sleeping orphans. Masa instantly saw bright blonde hair and smiled as he started to make his way over to the blonde. Click. Clack. Click. Clack. His soft yet rhythmic steps filled the entire room and seemed to reverberate throughout the furniture and the young children's small forms. But none stirred, for the skilled assassin's steps were too soothing to awake from their deep slumber. The silver-haired man stood next by Naruto's bed and took a good look at the young lad. He looked to be about 4 years old, and was wearing a white shirt that was tattered and worn out, and black shorts that seemed to be ripped in a few places. His blue sandals seemed to be in good condition, which was alright aside from his clothes. Masa frowned before he slipped a single finger under the lad's shirt and lifted it up enough so the nab could see the young boy's torso. The lad's form was small, waifish, and severely underdeveloped. You could plainly see his ribs as his tan skin hugged against the bones tightly, and Masayoshi could see scars, cuts, and bruises littered in many places across his small form. Just as I thought, Masayoshi growled softly as he gently covered the blonde's torso once again. It seems our young prince was neglected and abused, even though he should be deemed as a hero for imprisoning a great threat that could very much wipe out this pathetic and ungrateful village. Not that I wouldn't mind the old fox of doing so. The short man looked into the boy's face and saw him snoozing loudly, but soundly. Naruto seemed to be in a heavenly dream, given his carefree facial expression, with slightly pink cheeks and a big smile on his face. His small limbs were stretched haphazardly on the bed with his cover cast aside on the floor. Masa smiled softly with joy, amusement, and regret flashing through his eyes. He was certainly still hung up on Kushina and still loved the woman very much, but he thought the least he could do for her was take care of her son as much as he could. Well, if I can. I'm pretty sure Akihiko will be hogging up the young prince's time and probably won't let me get a chance to even speak to him, Masayoshi mused as he smiled softly. He looked down at Naruto before the man picked up the boy in his strong arms, carrying him bridal style. Masa quickly ran out of the orphanage with sudden, deathly silent steps before he began to hop away from the building towards the Hokage tower. The white-clad armored man shifted his sea-green eyes to the corner of his eyes before they narrowed. It seems I have some pursuers on my trail. The short man smiled a slightly smug smile as he sped up his hopping. This night shall be most entertaining. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village, was sitting in his office as he signed some documents with heavy shoulders. He was dressed in his white Hokage robes as his hat was placed securely on his head. The Sandaime sighed heavily as he finished another mission report. This particular report was especially long because of a misunderstanding that a few A and BU were sent on. Boy, was that messy. I'm getting too old for this. The elderly man muttered to himself as he picked up another few pages of paper and got to work. Before he could even place his pen on a single sheet of paper, the door to the office suddenly burst open, splintered in half. Hiruzen jumped up at the sudden action as saw a foot still sitting in the air as dust and wood shavings fluttered around the office, creating a cloud of gray smoke. The foot was lowered and a large figure entered the room. Are you Hiruzen Sarutobi? The figure asked in a deep, gruff voice, putting the old veteran on guard. Hokage of this ungrateful village? Hiruzen narrowed his eyes. He didn't know who this man was, but he'd be darned if he'd let anyone badmouth his home, especially to some complete stranger who broke down his down. That very expensive door. The elder Sarutobi sighed as he rubbed in temples, displaying a rare sight of annoyance with a slight mixture of anger. I am he. And do you know how much that door costs? The Hokage mumbled to the stranger. The newcomer, who Hiruzen finally could see a bit well, had spiky red hair with sleek red armor and piercing violet eyes. The Fire Shadow noticed that the newcomer's red armor had giant blotches of crimson on it that was not a part of the armor. The old man didn't seem to react, but his jaw tightened in apprehension. The redhead smirked at the old man's words, his cigar tilting upwards with his smile. You're pretty funny for an old geezer, you know that? The samurai's merry tone was cut off as quickly as it came. His violet eyes hardened and they blazed in a torrent of heavily controlled and focused anger. But enough with the chit-chat and let's cut to the chase, buddy. You Leaf Village goons have taken something that is rightful mine. Give it back, and there'll be no problems, capiche? Hiruzen was slightly shocked at the man's statement, but he was back on his guard in a nanosecond. He met the mysterious man's fiery gaze with his own as his hand slipped quietly towards a red button under his desk. I have no idea what you are talking about. As far as I am concerned, either I nor the Leaf owes you anything. I don't even know who you are. The redhead's anger washed away before he blinked. He, all of a sudden, let out a hearty laugh that made Hiruzen blink in surprise. The redhead started to rub the back of his head sheepishly as he waved a lazy hand at the veteran. Oh, my bad. Forgot to tell you about that, huh? Ha ha. Well, the name's Akihiko Uzumaki of the village hidden in the whirlpools, and this he suddenly pointed to his right just as another man appeared, kneeling on one knee, as if on cue. He had long silver hair tied in a ponytail, and wore white armor unlike his cohort. He held a small child in his hands and the old shinobi grimaced as he saw a large tuft of bright, blonde, spiky hair. Naruto, is what you owe me. The man, or Akihiko, told the Sandaime with a smug grin. Hiruzen gritted his teeth as he watched the persecutor demand Naruto. The young boy was like a grandson to him, and he always managed to make the years wash away from the old Sarutobi every time the boy filled him with joy, even if the brat was a troublemaker. The Sandaime slammed a fist on his desk as he stood up from his seat. Documented papers scattered everywhere as the old man focused his blazing eyes at the two men. Neither man flinched and just stared at the Hokage with an impassive face. He opened his mouth to say something but closed it when he remembered something. That red-headed man had just told him that his name was Akihiko Uzumaki, and he came from Whirlpool. But the wrinkly shinobi originally thought that the Uzumaki clan and the hidden Whirlpool village was wiped out from existence in the Second Great Shinobi War. But there were two living, breathing evidences that the lost clan and village still lived on. And since this Akihiko Uzumaki claims to be a relative of Naruto Uzumaki, Hiruzen had no jurisdiction over the boy anymore. Akihiko smirked at the man and lifted up his chin arrogantly. What's the matter, old-timer? Uzumaki got your tongue? The Hokage flashed the man a menacing look before he slowly sat back down and slumped in his chair. Today was not a good day for him. First were the humongous stacks of papers he had to fill out, then he had to deal with the council's riot almost every day of little unnecessary things. His teammate Danzo wanting to put Naruto under his twisted ranks, and now this. How heavenly. So tell me, the Sandaime began as he looked at the men with an exhausted gaze, what is your familial relationship with Naruto? The ginger just seemed to grin happily, and that made the old Sarutobi began to get unsettled by his smile. This man, this Akihiko, his smiles weren't normal whatsoever. They all were fake and each one seemed to have a way of saying, I promise your death will be quick. It made the Hokage sweat along his neck. Oh, Naruto? He's just my dear little nephew. Akihiko said as he chuckled darkly. My little sis Kushina should have told you that, but it seems she's playing poker with Kami right now. That made Sarutobi gawk incredulously at the man. Kushina Uzumaki had a brother, and he was standing right in front of him? But Kushina never said anything about having a brother, much less a family. Sarutobi shouted. Funny how things work out, huh? The samurai said grinning, before his look turned into a cold glare that made the temperature in the room drop. It made the fire shadow's old brittle bones creak and moan as he made the simplest movements. Like how you neglected to take the consideration of Whirlpool's new prince, Akihiko hissed angrily. Hiruzen sighed in defeat and felt the overwhelming pain of shame, guilt, and failure. He had failed to find Naruto the proper home he so deserved, he had failed to show the way of the world to the boy, he had failed to make the village see him as a hero, but most shamefully of all he had failed his student and unfortunate processor, Minato Namikaze, of taking care of his only son. So the Hokage croaked out as he held his tired wrinkled face in his hands. Are you going to take away Naruto? Akihiko stared at the man for a moment, a brow raised at the man's demeanor. The geezer looked as if his body had put on more years in an instant, and all of the fires in his eyes were washed away. The batosai was confused as why the powerful shinobi in front of him looked so depressed. Well, that wasn't what my old man described to me about this old man, Akihiko thought as he scratched the back of his head. He looked down at Masayoshi, who was still kneeling on one leg and clutching onto the whiskered child in a gentle, yet firm grip. His friend just looked up at him and shrugged, just as perplexed as he was. Akihiko sighed as he swished his cigar in his mouth before he looked up at the concrete ceiling. Yeah, he finally answered, exhaling a large cloud of smoke. Hiruzen flinched before his shoulders sagged and his old heart grew heavy. I see, he whispered softly as he linked his fingers together on his desk. But Akihiko drawled out before he rummaged in his pocket and threw a scroll at the old geezer. Hiruzen caught it and looked at it skeptically before he opened it and began to read. My old man, or formerly known as the daimyo of Whirlpool and the leader of the illustrious Uzumaki clan, states in the scroll that he wants the bad blood between you leaf idiots and us to end. He's such a softy. Akihiko snorted, making Masa smile at his friend in amusement. Sarutobi's old eyes widened in surprise once he read Akihiko's statement in the scroll's fine print. But there was something in the message that made Hiruzen very confused and very weary. It also says here that in order for the alliance to be reinstated once again, Naruto must marry one of Konoha's clan heirs? Why is that? He asked. Akihiko sighed and blew out a ring of smoke in annoyance. Pop still doesn't quite trust ya, something all we Whirlpool samurai agree on too, so he wants to do the Ciare, Clan Restoration Act, with one heir, and all of the hidden Whirlpool's relations will only be transferred to that clan. Hiruzen stroked his goatee in deep thought. A Clan Restoration Act? That hasn't happened since the Second Great Ninja War. The Ciare was banished from Konoha all those years ago, when the rioting of clans had grown too unbearable and violent that it nearly caused a civil war in the village hidden in the leaves when there was a war being fought at that time. He wondered about how the clan heads of the shinobi clans would react. Would they be okay with it, or would they profusely reject it? He would have to call back the council once again tonight. Getting on with business, Hiruzen straightened up his back and gazed into the eyes of the samurai with a neutral stare. Tell me, Akihiko-san, do you perhaps have a clan already in mind? Now that made Akihiko stop and think. He folded his arms and teetered his weight from side to side as his foot tapped against the floor at a fast pace. His brows furrowed in frustration and his teeth would occasionally grind on the tip of his cigar. From this action, Hiruzen could plainly see the similarities of him and Naruto. Hiruzen would see Naruto do that sometimes, A/N, minus the cigar and the biting on it, if he was in deep thought. It was a spitting image. Truly this man was the boy's uncle. Akihiko bit on his cigar in annoyance when his brain didn't pull up anything about the situation. He hated to think. His usually course of action would usually just beat the living daylights out of people to get his answers. But he couldn't beat himself up to get his desired answers right now, well, physically that is. Crap it all to hell. Akihiko screamed in his mind, his biting slowly turning into chomping. Did Kushi mention any friends that she might have had over in this backwater village? He racked his brain for answers, but he continued to draw up a blank. That is until something finally clicked in his brain. It was about 14 years ago, when he was only 15 years old, and the villagers and surviving clan members of the Uzumaki clan were busy rebuilding their village that had turned into ruins and after the Second Great Ninja War. Flashback begins. Akihiko was hefting a rather large and long pillar of wood to a few carpenters working on the new home for the Uzumaki clan. He was wearing a simple white t-shirt whose sleeves had been ripped off, black pants, and black sandals. It had been about 3 years since the villagers and surviving clan members had returned to the ruins of the village hidden in the whirlpools, and every single person has been hard at work trying to rebuild the city to its former glory. "Hey, Akihiko-san!" someone yelled. Said teen turned in that direction with a lazy expression on his face. The carpenter waved him over where others were busy putting some finishing touches on a roof of a house. "Over here! We need that to support the building," right? The red-headed teen sighed before he made his way over to the others. He hefted the wooden pillar slowly towards the 4 men on the ground floor that were busy hammering a pillar to the support beams. 2 strayed away from their work to go and get the other pillar from Akihiko. "Thank you very much, Lord Akihiko," one of the men said as he bowed respectively. The teen just groaned and waved him off before he began walking down a familiar pathway. The 4 looked at each other before looking back at the distraught teenager again. They all had the same thought going through their minds though. He was going to try and look for Kushina Uzumaki again. Akihiko stuffed his hands in his pockets and brooded quietly as he lumbered loudly through a pathway he was taking where he last saw his little sister. He gazed out into the opening that had piles of rubble that was still littered on its fields. He sighed and started to make his way through the rubble searching for something, anything that was a sign that his sister was still alive and well. After nearly an hour of searching, Akihiko sat down on a boulder as he panted heavily. His shirt had dirt and mud smeared on it, and his face had patches of it as well. He had been moving rocks that were twice his size to find anything that his sister may have left behind. He looked down at his hands as they clasped together. He was distressed, tired, and even more so depressed than usual. Just when he was about to go back searching again, he suddenly stopped when he saw an abused and slightly ripped piece of paper. It looked as it had a tango with all of the elements, and somehow stayed in contact. Curious, the teen picked up the paper and turned it to its front side. It had some words on it, so he began to read. "Dear Big Brother Akihiko." The red-headed teen eyes widened and his grip on the paper grew harder. "Sup bro? Are you still crying over little ol' me? Ha ha ha, that's just like you to get so worried about me, though I can't say that I haven't been crying over you and father, though I can't reveal my location to you though, if you ever get the chance to get this message. If I do, then someone will be out to get me and our Uzumaki bloodline, or so what my superiors say. It'll get really messy really fast, you know, but I can say that I'm doing really well where I am right now. So you and Papa have no need to worry over me. I can damn well take care of myself, you know, but ever minute, no, every second of the day, I always wonder how you guys are doing back at home. I really miss it over there, and sometimes I find myself crying some nights thinking that I'll never get to see you guys again, but I have to keep strong because one day, we'll see each other again. Databane." Akihiko chuckled at his sister's antics. She was still lively even in her writings. "Oh, and before I forget, I just became a genin at the ninja village I'm at. I met some really nice people like Hitomi Hyuga and Mikoto Uchiha. All 3 of us are on the same genin squad and we're already the best of friends. There's also this really weird boy named Minato Namikaze. He doesn't talk much and seems to blush a lot. I think he has some sort of weird condition when he stares at me, because whenever he does his face goes completely red. Such a weirdo. So that's pretty much it on my end, but I really hope that I'll get to see you and Papa again really soon. I mean, who's gonna wrestle with me and give me noogies when I'm in a bad mood? Sincerely, Kushina Uzumaki." Akihiko felt some silent tears roll down his cheeks as he smiled at the paper in a sad but happy smile. His sister was alive and well. That was all that mattered to the ginger. He gently folded the piece of paper and stuffed it in his pockets. He then started to run away from the ruins, and started to make his way back home to tell his father. He'd be excited to hear this. Flashback and Kai. Akihiko smiled remorsefully at the memory, but he quickly steeled his face to not show any weakness to the enemy/soon-to-be friends. "Yeah, 2 candidates actually," Akihiko finally spoke after a long moment of silence. "Do you guys have an Uchiha heir?" Hiruzen raised a brow at Akihiko's request but said nothing. "Yes, but the youngest heir that is Naruto's age is a male." The Hokage thought that it would have been quite amusing to see the Uchiha clan bicker over this if their heir was a female. He looked at Akihiko smoking calmly on his cigar, and that made the old shinobi feel his smoking habits come on. But with a child in the room, he was prevented from doing so because of his morals. Akihiko just stared at the Hokage with a lazy stare, but inwardly he was sighing in relief at the news. He knew about the Uchihas and their stuck-up attitudes. If they ever married someone from the Uzumaki clan, an heir to be exact, it would have boosted their egos even higher. The bunch of pricks. He just hoped that this Hitomi gave birth to a decent enough Hyuga for the Uzumaki clan to tolerate. If she didn't, well, there were going to be some problems. "What about the Hyuga clan, he asked. Akihiko's eyes widened a fraction of an inch when he saw the old Hokage give of a warm smile. Now you, my friend, have made a good choice, was all he said as he continued to grin. How so, Hokage-sama? This time it was Masayoshi who answered for the first time since they entered the office. He stood up slowly with a still slumbering Naruto in his arms. Sarutobi just stood up, which made the men stiffen into position. Akihiko's hands instantly gripped the hilt of his sword while Masa tensed his legs, getting ready to jump away if it ever called for it. But when they saw the old man turn his back to him to go stand in front of the large window behind his desk, they slowly relaxed themselves. Hinata Hyuga is the heir to the Hyuga clan and daughter of the clan head, Hayashi Hyuga, and matriarch of the clan, Hitomi Hyuga. Sarutobi began as if nothing happened. She's quite an odd one from all of her rigid relatives. Just like her mother. Why's that old man? Akihiko asked curiously. Hiruzen felt a vein pop on his head, but he calmed himself down. He turned to them and clasped his hands together behind his back. Well, she is a Hyuga, yet she is not a Hyuga. Akihiko seemed thoroughly confused by the man's riddle, but Masayoshi immediately got it. It made the silver-haired man smile a little at the Hokage's words. Let me explain. Hinata is a very shy and soft-spoken little girl, a monumental difference between her and her relatives. She doesn't talk very much, which is something she has in common with her relatives, but she is very kind and gentle towards the people who are lower than her status, and very much so for those who rank higher than her. The Hyuga clan, well, the Hyuga elder sees this as a weakness and constantly scolds the girl of her supposed outrageous personality. This has caused the heiress to retreat into a shell of shyness, and almost all of her confidence has withered away from the abuse and ridicule she receives daily from the elders. What the fuck? Akihiko screamed as his hands suddenly slammed loudly onto the Hokage's desk. Miraculously, Naruto didn't wake up, but it made both Hiruzen and Masayoshi wince. Why are those old farts beating up an innocent little girl? Why haven't you stopped this? Aren't you the Hokage, old man? Akihiko roared before he grabbed the Sandame's robes by the collar and lifted him up into his angry face. Yes, I am Hokage, but there are even some things that I hold no power over. This is a clan affair, surely you of all people can understand, Akihiko-san, Hiruzen said with a calm voice, not in the least frightened of the situation he was in. Akihiko growled softly before he let go and started to mumble under his breath. Hiruzen dusted off his robes and continued his speech. Anyway, although Hinata is less confident than she used to be, her mother and her father are both trying their hardest to bring that little turtle out of her shell. And I know that the marriage will be a success for two reasons really. 1. She can escape the possibility of being branded with the caged bird seal, and 2. It will help her gain her confidence back even faster with Naruto as her husband. Caged bird seal, huh? Masa said in a soft voice, making Akihiko wince at his tone. I think that was the Uzumaki clan's most vile creation of all of their seals, would you not agree, Batosai? Yeah, I don't know what my ancestors were thinking with that piece of shit. 5. Akihiko grumbled. So what's this about Hinata getting confidence back from the little squirt? He said, moving on as he flicked Naruto's nose with a finger. The boy's nose wrinkled, but he still did not wake up. Man, this kid can sleep. Akihiko thought as a grin stretched upon his lips before he turned his attention back to the Sandame. It's quite simple really, Sarutobi said with a smile. Naruto oozes tons of confidence of how he will one day become one of the greatest ninja in Konoha and make everyone look up to him and respect him. And since the boy has much confidence, I figured that Hinata will start to rub off on him and her confidence will begin to build up back to its former glory. A/N. Remember, Naruto and Hinata are only 4 years old, so Hinata doesn't really know who he is yet. Hiruzen sat back down in his chair and linked his fingers together, as he smiled. So what do you think? Do you wish to enact the Uzumaki clan and the Hyuga clan in the CRA? Akihiko looked over to his companion, who gave him a nod and a happy, if not enthusiastic, smile towards him. Akihiko raised a brow, slightly confused by his friend's behavior. Casting that aside for the moment, the ginger then turned his attention back and held out a hand towards the old Sarutobi. The man looked at it before he took it into his own and shook it. The batosai of the Whirlpool nation grinned excitedly. Well, I say, you've got yourself a deal, Sandame Hokage. Let's round up and meet the new in-laws, eh? Angry steps could be heard throughout the western section of the Hyuga mansion. This angry and supposedly hate-fueled steps belonged to none other than Hayashi Hyuga, head of the mighty Hyuga clan. He had long, dark brown hair, and featureless white eyes like all members of his clan. He wore very traditional, loose-fitting robes with a long-sleeved brown haori, and Hayashi, like all of the Hyuga, took pride in being a member of their powerful clan. As the head of one of the Leaf Village's most powerful and influential clan, he was a man that valued power, honor, strength, and prestige. He has long since learned how to harness and control his emotions since his early childhood. However, today was a rare day that he let his emotions leak out. The powerful man was seething with rage and bloodlust as his steps grew into stomps, making every Hyuga in the mansion hear his thundering steps. It was nigh, but all of the servants and other clan members who happened to be awake and traveling down the halls quickly scurried out of the man's way. He veered down a corner into a large hallway and slid open the first Harama-matted sliding doors that were located to the left. Once he was inside of his bedroom, his eyes softened greatly at the display that unraveled in front of him. His wife, Hitomi Hyuga, was sitting on her knees on their shared futon mattress, cradling their daughter Hinata Hyuga gently in her long, slender arms. She wore the traditional Hyuga garb like him, but hers was styled in the color of dark purple with her obi tied into a large bow on her back. Hitomi craned her neck to see her husband start to kneel next by her, and their sleeping child. She smiled lovingly at him, and gave him a soft kiss against his cheek when he was close enough to her. Hayashi responded with a kiss atop her purple eggplant hair and began to stroke his daughter's dark blue hair. "How did it go with the council, my sweet?" she asked him in a quiet voice. Her lavender-tinted eyes were weary but were sparkling with hope. Hayashi looked into her eyes, his heart breaking for what he was about to tell her. "Not very well, my dear," he said with a sigh as he ran a hand through his long hair. After hearing his tone, Hitomi's face grew grim. What did they want? What did they say?" He looked at her, his face rigid and stony. She could clearly see the anger that began to foster in his pale eyes. "The elders has deemed our daughter unfit to inherit the clan, so they plan on giving the seat of head to the next child that will be born by us and brand Hinata with the caged bird seal." Hayashi growled and his hands tightened into fists. For some unknown reason, they seemed to know that we were secretly planning on having another child, though neither of us breathed a soul to anyone. Hitomi's eyes widened in horror at the revelation. Hinata was going to be demoted from her throne and be branded like an animal like the rest of their branch member relatives. "This is absolutely outrageous," Hitomi hissed in outrage. "Hinata is only 4 years old, and they are already planning on marking her with that accursed seal. The child we were planning on having is not even born yet, much less developing in my womb. How can those old fools demand such a thing?" Hayashi sympathized greatly with his wife. He asked that very same question to the council as well. "They say that Hinata is not suitable to be clan heir and should be replaced. They see Hinata's kind heart and gentle nature as weakness. Therefore, they decreed that our next child must be trained vigorously by them, and be taught the proper ways of the Hyuga and take the throne as its rightful heir. Since Hinata will not be heir, they say that they must find an arranged husband for her." He was unable to continue when his boiling wife cut him off. "They cannot do that. Only we can enact of seeking an arranged marriage for our daughter," she whispered in an angered voice. "I made sure to remind those wretched elders," Hayashi said in a slightly frustrated tone as he looked away for a moment, "but they said that if we are unable to find a husband for her, then they will take charge and find one of their liking." Hitomi's lips quivered as she stared down at her sleeping daughter. Hinata was wearing a simple white kimono, hugging a teddy bear her father had given to her for her 3rd birthday. Her breathing was soft as she clutched onto her bear in an iron-tight grip, and she had this constant blush that all young children seem to have at an early age. Hitomi felt silent tears roll down her cheeks and she hugged her only daughter, for right now, tightly against her chest. "They want to rob my child of her birthright and turn our unborn one into a mindless puppet under their rule. We cannot simply let them do that, Hayashi. We just cannot." Hayashi stared at his wife with a remorse expression before he wrapped his strong arms around her and their beloved daughter. "I know, and I will do everything in my power to stop the old fools from their wrongdoings. I won't rest until our happiness is happy," he said as he gently stroked his daughter's pink cheek with a finger. Just as he finished saying his promise, the two spouses were suddenly brought out by their stupor by a light rapping on the door. Hayashi instantly steeled himself, and removed his arms away from his daughter and wife. "Enter," he commanded in an authoritative tone, and the door slid open revealing a branch member guard sitting on his knees at the entrance of the door. "My sincerest apologizes for interrupting you, Hayashi-sama and Hitomi-sama." The guard apologized as he bowed humbly before them with his forehead touching gently against the ground. "But the Hokage has requested your audiences at once. He says that it is urgent." Hayashi flinned his eyes over to his wife who had caught his gaze. Hayashi turned back to the guard with his face looking ever impassive. "Very well then. We shall leave at once," he replied coolly. "Prepare 3 escort guards for our departure." "Hi!" The guard then lifted himself up from his bowed position, closed the door gently, and swiftly walked away to go rally up some more guards. The clan head and the matriarch had only one thing coursing through their minds as they looked at each other again. Just what did the Hokage want with them so late at night? Hayashi and Hitomi were walking with 3 branch member guards down the hallway of the 2nd floor of the Hokage Tower. Hinata was not currently with them because they had placed a few guards around her room as she slept, just in case the elders did something funny. Among those guards was Hyuga, a caretaker of the young heiress of the Hyuga clan, Hinata Hyuga. He had spiky down hair, which was very in the Hyuga compound, and a well-defined nose with pale pupilless eyes. He was wearing the standard leaf shinobi attire, a green flak jacket with black pants and blue sandals, but his hitate was embedded in an all-black bandana that was tied securely around his forehead. The Hyuga entourage reached their desired destination and Hayashi was the one to knock softly against the door that had a white plaque that had black kanji letters that wrote, "Hokage" above the oak door. "Enter." A raspy but authoritative voice called from behind the door. Hayashi and Hitomi looked at each other one final time before the clan head twisted the knob and softly pushed open the door. When they all walked inside, they all saw 2 men dressed in sleek armor standing on either side of the Hokage's desk, and the shorter of the 2 was holding a small form in his eyes. When Hitomi squinted her eyes at the little figure, she gasped, "That's Naruto!" Hitomi called out before she narrowed her beautiful lavender-tinted eyes at the men. Veins instantly formed around her eyes and her balled her hands went suddenly glowing blue with chakra. What are you doing with him? Unhand that child immediately. Oh, you're pretty feisty for a Hyuga. The taller samurai replied as he took out his cigar from his mouth and smeared the bottom on the Hokage's desk, canceling the smoking item from produce smoke. But I have every reason to let my cohort hold this child, for you see, Naruto Uzumaki is a close family relative of mine. Hitomi was thoroughly confused at the man's sudden declaration. Hayashi turned his attention to the old Hokage who was sighing and rubbing his temples to cool down his growing annoyance. Hokage-sama, Hayashi began slowly, what is this man implying? And that's when Hiruzen explained everything to the Hyuga entourage with a heavy and slightly peeved voice. And that is why you two are here before me. Hiruzen sighed. So what do you say? The man named Akihiko asked as he stared at the Hyuga with an icy cold stare. Do you agree to the terms or not? Hayashi stared into the eyes of the batosai with an equally cold glare. But the clan head's glare for some reason could not beat the strange man's one. It was like the ginger's steely gaze was laced with glaciers as cold as the frozen seas and his eyes held a disturbing emptiness that made Hayashi feel very uneasy around the man. But the Hyuga was extremely good of not showing his emotions. All of a sudden, Hitomi started to gently pull on his robes which made the man forcefully break away his gaze from the red samurai. Please give us one moment, Hayashi said before he and his wife excused themselves out of the door before reclosing it. What is it, Hitomi? I think we should agree to it. She blurted out as soon as his questions uttered past his lips. Hayashi's eyes widened before they stared at his beloved with a neutral yet confused gaze. He didn't scream, absolutely not, like he thought he would. But what with the Hyuga Council getting severely edgy and adamant on Hinata's case, he had no reason to argue with his wife. Their child's well-being was put on his top priority list as well as Hitomi's. He didn't say anything but he nodded for his wife to continue. Hitomi smiled gratefully and let go of her husband's garbs. She hadn't let go ever since they walked outside of the door. The elders are getting restless and they are going to initiate their plans sooner than we anticipated, Hitomi explained. Her husband rubbed his chin before nodding in agreement. We were previously talking about how to find a husband for her, and the Uzumaki clan will provide a safe enough home for her, and she will be unreachable for the elders' twisted and demented grasps. This will greatly help her and provide us with immense reassurance to know that she is in a safer place than the Hyuga compound. Do you not agree? Hayashi pondered the situation a bit longer before he sighed and ran his fingers through his hair again. He was very overprotective of Hinata, even though he never admitted it, and to suddenly arrange a marriage for her when she's only 4 years old? It made him sad and a little annoyed, but this is for her safety, her well-being, he thought solemnly before he took his wife's hands and smiled at her with a weary smile. Okay. We will do this. For Hinata, Hayashi said as he squeezed her hands for reassurance. Hitomi smiled back, but her smile was filled with joy and relief. For Hinata. She responded and gave his hands the squeezing reassurance they so desired. They both took in a deep breath before steeling their facial expressions against and walked back inside the Hokage's office. Akihiko was smiling as he released the chakra he had discreetly applied to his ears. He had heard the whole conversation that commenced outside between the Hyuga clan's head and his wife, and he could honestly say, Hinata's condition was way worse than he initially thought if that prick of a husband was worried that much about his daughter. But it does keep things a bit more interesting on our end, the batosai thought sinisterly while he looked to see Masayoshi have his eyes closed. The assassin's eyes snapped open and he looked at Akihiko and nodded. Looks like the people in question are coming back, good thing I have Masa for recon. The door creaked open and a couple came in and approached the Hokage's desk with calm, cool, and graceful steps. They stopped in front of the desk and Hayashi craned his neck to look at Akihiko. The man was grinning a slightly feral grin. So do we have a deal with the elusive Hyuga clan? Akihiko asked as he stuck out a hand towards Hayashi. Hayashi looked at the red samurai's hand before looking at his wife. She gave him a soft smile and nodded slightly. The clan head sighed before he took the man's outstretched hand with his own. We have a deal. They both glared at each other before their hands shook once in confirmation. The Sandaime Hokage smiled happily at the two men. Excellent, he said in a raspy voice. Now the two clans will have to sign a small packet of documented paper to verify its authenticity. Sarutobi took out a packet that had no more than 3 or 4 pages. He suddenly pointed to the blank spaces that were at the bottom of the paper. Just sign your names in the designated areas and that will ultimately confirm the arranged marriage of Naruto Uzumaki and Hinata Hyuga. Hiruzen gave the two men a feathered quill and they both dipped it in the ink at the same time. Akihiko went to sign first because the clan that was depleting and were the ones who requested to participate in the CRA. Then they always signed first in Konoha's laws. Hayashi signed next and it continued until they reached the last page which said, the requirements and requests of the two clans from each other. Akihiko raised a brow at the wording. Hey Gramps, what does this last page mean? The batosai asked rudely to the fire shadow of the lad of fire. Before the shinobi could answer, Masayoshi beat him to the punch. I believe that this page is explaining that the two clans write down what they expect to happen between each other. Like a trade of sorts. Hiruzen nodded at the white samurai's answer. I see, Hayashi said slowly as he rubbed his chin. Then shall I write the first rule, Akihiko-san? Said man just waved dismissively because he had not thought of any rules yet. Hayashi began to write quickly, his letters tight and neat. His wife intervened to write some rules herself, but after a few minutes, the clan head was finally finished. He gently placed it on the Hokage's desk for all to see. Rule number 1. The two clans will honor and treat each other with equal respect, no matter what statuses they uphold. Rule number 2. No secrets shall be held from the clans. All personal secrets are understandable, but anything pertaining to clan affairs, it is shared to the other clan. Rule number 3. No acts of violence shall be committed upon each clan. Their heirs also pertain to this rule. The hurting or maiming of the heirs will result in punishment by jail or execution. Rule number 4. The married couple will treat each other with the utmost love and respect. Rule number 5. Any inappropriate actions that are committed by the couple, preferably the groom, that should not be committed until later years, the father or father-in-law has the right to straighten out their heinous acts. Rule number 6. These rules can be changed at any time, but only by the main family of the married couple, and they all have to agree on the terms of the rule in order for them to verify it. Rule number 7. The main family of the arranged couple will treat each other like a family, and not formally. Awkwardness is suffocating and no one likes to go through it. Akihiko grinned as he finished writing that last rule. The man absolutely hated it when people, like his family or his closest friends, addressed him with formality. It made him sound old and he was downright uncomfortable with it. There. Is that all of the rules for our clans, Hayashi? Said man sported on a slight smile at the samurai. Already was the man following the last rule of the two powerful clans. Truly this man did bear a striking resemblance in the blonde lad's attitude. Hayashi chuckled as he folded his arms. It seems to be in order, Akihiko. The man just smiled and gave Hayashi a friendly slap on the back. The clan had nearly tipped forward and was slightly winded from the force of Akihiko's hit. That's the spirit. Well, it's time we brought the little brat back to Whirlpool. It'll be quite some time before he comes back here. He snapped his fingers and Masayoshi instantly came by his side. The two started to walk out before they were stopped again. How long will it be until Naruto comes back to Konoha? Akihiko looked over his shoulder and looked into the eyes of Hiruzen, who was displaying a huge amount of sadness of losing Naruto. The samurai sighed and turned fully around. He'll come back when he's 12 years old to be assigned as a genin. That's quite a long time. Yes, but it's all necessary. Naruto needs to get reacquainted with his homeland. During that time, he will also be training vigorously if he is going to inherit the throne as the daimyo of Whirlpool. The daimyo of Whirlpool? Hitomi stammered out in shock and awe, displaying the same shocked emotions of everyone else in the room. But he's only a child. What about you? Isn't the daimyo your father? This shocked everyone even further. Aren't you supposed to inherit the throne before Naruto does? Akihiko grinned before he waved a single finger. TSK, TSK, TSK. So nosy. He mocked. The thing is, I don't want that position. It's too much work. Naruto can have it. Don't you think you're being a bit selfish, Akihiko-san? Hiruzen asked. Akihiko looked up at the ceiling and scratched the back of his red head as if contemplating about something. Maybe. But it's for me to know, and you not to find out. The tall man suddenly turned towards the Hyugas with a lazy stare before he smiled at them. Hinata-chan can visit Naruto after a few years. So about when they turn 8 years old? Yeah, that'll give them plenty of time to train before we drop the bomb on them. Don't you think? Hayashi and Hitomi started to sweat nervously at the use of Akihiko's brash words before they exchanged worried glances. They looked back at the batosai and nodded hesitantly towards him. Great. So see you guys in 4 years then. We'll send you a messenger bird when it's time. Till then. He gave them a two-fingered salute before he, Masayoshi, and Naruto started to suddenly shimmer before they completely vanished into thin air. The Hyugas and the Sandaime Hokage all looked at each other and exchanged looks. It looks like these next 4 years were going to go very differently from what they had originally thought. Hiruzen sighed before he took off his Hokage's hat and ran an aged hand through his gray hair. It looks like I will be calling the council earlier than I expected, he grumbled. Next time on the Lost Clan of Whirlpool, going back home. Order! Order! There shall be order in this council meeting, the Sandaime Hokage bellowed, silencing the rapidly escalating murmurs and shouts that were coming from the council room. Hiruzen Sarutobi had called the civilian and shinobi council to call to a situation that has occurred this night, the return of the Uzumaki clan. The council settled down, but the old Sarutobi could still hear the murmurings and grumblings from specifically the civilian council members. The members of the shinobi council were all quiet but exchanged astonished and nervous looks with each other. The Hokage cleared his throat before speaking once again. I know that this predicament does seem very illogical and quite unbelievable, but what I state is the truth. A civilian suddenly slammed his hands on the desk and stood up. From what has been described to us, the Uzumaki clan has been completely exterminated since the Second Great Ninja War. How can you be so sure that they are really revived? The Sandaime fixed the foolish civilian council member a death glare, immediately silencing him. Apparently, this fool forgot his place, and would probably need reconditioning later. Before the old man could give his reply, he was beaten to the punch. He knows that the Uzumaki clan is revived because he has seen 2 members of the Whirlpool nation, and one of them was a member of the Uzumaki clan. As have I, a very calm and authority-wielding voice stated. Everyone turned their heads to look at Hayashi Hyuga, the clan head of the prestigious Hyuga clan, with 2 of the Hyuga elders sitting right beside him. Hiruzen smiled at the man and nodded at him. Yes, Hayashi-san is very correct indeed. Would you please come down to the front? I am pretty sure you and I both have some explaining to do this night, he said as he started to wave the man down. Of course, Hokage-sama, Hayashi said as he gave him a curt nod before standing up and gracefully walking down the stairs that led up into the council's desks and chairs. Hayashi then turned to look up into the throngs of people, shinobi and citizens, with his arms folded and his eyes icy and cold. The son of the daimyo of the Whirlpool nation has visited us. That lone sentence started up roars and shouts of disbelief and indignation. The volume escalated and the room was buzzing with activity and adrenaline, something that hasn't happened for years. Even the shinobi side of the council, who were usually more composed than the citizens, had very loud murmurings of their own. Hiruzen started to bang a gavel hard against his desk. The room's buzz went down to a minimum, but there were still traces of it here and there. Anyway, Hiruzen said, moving on, the son's name is Akihiko Uzumaki. Loud whispers started to make their way known and the shinobi council started to fear what the Hokage would say next. They severely hoped that they were wrong, but fate had them all webbed up in its thread of dread. Funny how it can be a real bitch, huh? Hiruzen took in a deep breath as he slowly said the next part. And he is Naruto Uzumaki's uncle. After the Hokage finished the one part, the council room exploded into angry shouts and demanding screams. Well, it was only the civilian side, of course. Absurd. One civilian council member shouted. You expect us to believe that that thing is the nephew of the son of the daimyo of Whirlpool? That demon brat is an orphan boy with no family. How can he be royalty? The civilians all agreed with the man who spoke up, sharing their own nods and shouts. Silence! Hiruzen hissed as he released an impossible amount of killer intent into the room. Everyone immediately quieted and were struggling for breath against the Hokage's unbridled rage. Never before had they seen, much less heard of the Sandaime become this angry. They thought that he was very peace-loving and they assumed he forgot his shinobi ways. Truly, they were wrong as they witnessed firsthand of his power that he kept hidden away for so many years. They had forgotten that they were dealing with the third Hokage, the Fire Shadow, and most importantly, the Professor. Hayashi was miraculously still standing as the Hokage continued to unload his hidden rage. But many could see that the powerful Hyuga's face had contorted into a semi-look of pain and his body was slightly trembling. Inwardly, the clan head was screaming for it to stop with the killer intent clawing away at his insides. It felt as if he was dumped into a pit of molten lava, his bones melting and his innards searing away into a fiery inferno. Hiruzen took in a deep breath and calmed himself. His killer intent immediately receded and the air was still and cool again, much to the relief of the council. Suddenly, everyone heard 3 thumps echo throughout the room and looked to see 3 members of the civilian council lying unconscious in their seats. Hiruzen sighed before he snapped his fingers. 2 Konoha A and BU Black Op members instantly appeared before the Hokage, bowing humbly to him on one knee with a fist planted firmly against the ground. How may we be of service to you, Hokage-sama? The 2 asked simultaneously to their leader. Hiruzen regarded them with a respectful nod. 3 council members have been rendered unconscious. Please escort them to the hospital so that I may later speak with them. Hi, Hokage-sama. They quickly disappeared along with the 3 unconscious bodies into thin air. Many would never get how they could be able to take away things without touching them. It was very mysterious indeed. Sarutobi looked back towards the civilian council with a cold stare. They all went nervous and quiet in a matter of seconds. Many could not meet the Hokage's icy stare, but those who did were sweating bullets as they assumed that the third was punching holes through them with a mere look. Tell me, are there any more interruptions that will be made? Because if so, then please share it with me. Nobody spoke. Hiruzen was smirking inwardly, but he settled for a sickly sweet smile that did not seem normal as it further scared the council. No? Good. Now let us continue on with the meeting. Would you care to explain a little bit more about our situation, Hayashi-san? The old veteran asked as he fixed his softened gaze towards the Hyuga clan head. Hayashi nodded at the Hokage before he readdressed the crowd. As you probably know, the Whirlpool nation only harbors the protection of samurais and not shinobi. They believe having shinobi among their ranks is unethical and non-traditional because they believe that having ninja will make them look weak because of how heavy we shinobi rely on our jutsus. This time, the shinobi part of the council started to murmur their own thoughts. Though they weren't as nearly as loud as the civilian portion, at least they had some brains. Be that as it may, the Stark man continued, silencing the grumblings of his shinobi cohorts. They are still powerful enough to take down numerous of shinobi armies with only a small platoon of 2,000 samurai. The ninja council members all begrudgingly nodded their heads in agreement to Hayashi's statement. Many of them had encountered samurai of Whirlpool and every time they seemed to trump them without any form of ninjutsu or genjutsu. They solely relied on kenjutsu, or if they were forced to, taijutsu. And every time, it left many Konoha shinobi licking their wounds in defeat and unimaginable humiliation of their loss against such a small army of samurai. Before Hayashi could continue his explanation, one of the members of the civilian council interrupted him. What does it matter the reason? They are just lowly samurai. Our ninjas should have no problem dealing with them. Every clan head, as well as many of the older members of the civilian council, stared at the man while asking themselves if he was really that stupid. By the look on the fool's face, he obviously was. Finally, it was Inoichi Yamanaka, head of the Yamanaka clan, that answered the idiot's stupid question. Inoichi had long dirty blonde hair that reached down his back, which was spiky on top and ended in a long ponytail. He also had blue-green eyes and strong facial features which included a well-defined jawline. He wore the standard flak jacket over a black outfit, complete with handguards, a forehead protector, and a sleeveless red haori. The reason may not matter to you, fool, but it matters greatly to those of us who have actually fought them and go out of the village walls to protect you from enemy and die. For you, Inoichi said angrily as he narrowed his eyes at the civilian idiot. And the reason we don't send our ninja after them is because we don't have enough manpower to face them in open battle. They would outnumber us and overpower us as well, a lazy and bored voice said, adding his 2 cents in. It was Shikaku Nara, the head of the Nara clan and good friend and former teammate of Inoichi Yamanaka. Shikaku had 2 scars on the right side of his face which were probably his only most noticeable feature. He had dark hair tied up into a spiky ponytail, dark eyes, as well as a goatee with his ears pierced with silver-looped earrings. He wore a mesh shirt underneath his flak jacket, a deerskin coat over that, black pants, and hand guards. He had his elbow propped up on the table as he held his head in his hand. He was getting thoroughly annoyed with the stupidity the civilian council was displaying, so he chose to show his irritation by tapping his finger rapidly on his desk. But they're just samurai. You're ninja. Surely you can defeat them with some or your jutsu or something? The same fool questioned. Hiruzen frankly had enough of this idiot whose name seemed to escape him at the moment. No, we cannot. These samurai are no ordinary samurai we are dealing with. They are not the sword-wielding ruffians that supposedly call themselves samurai here. This is the Central Guardians we are dealing with. They are the elite samurai guild of Whirlpool and are not to be underestimated or trifled with, said the third. Several younger civilian members still looked to be confused, so Shibi Aburame, the head of the Aburame clan, decided to clarify further. Just like any other member of the Aburame clan, Shibi was very stoic and silent. He, and majority of the members of the Aburame clan, was very cautious by nature and also believed in never underestimating your opponent no matter how small or weak they may appear. Shibi, like all members of his clan, had his eyes obscured by dark glasses which featured a single tassel hanging down from one side. He had very spiky short black hair and a thin mustache. He wore a high-collared outfit with a long-sleeved black undershirt and black pants while carrying a gourd on his back that he used for holding more kakechu. 2. The Central Guardians, he began smoothly, shocking many that the man could actually speak, especially trained to combat against shinobi. They have armor that prevents us from using most ninjutsu or genjutsu to retaliate against them. With samurai specializing in close combat, it is not logical to engage them in battle unprepared, with only taijutsu. With the civilian idiots quieted, Hayashi Hyuga continued. The batosai is the leader of these elite group of samurai. As Sarutobi and Hayashi expected, this news made the blood drain from the face of every ninja in the room, for they all knew how powerful the man was. And according to the reports the Hokage and myself have went over, Akihiko is the batosai. This made the shinobi of the room cringe in fear and they quickly started to murmur amongst themselves. Others apparently did not know why the shinobi suddenly became antsy, hence the next stupid question from a blonde-haired woman. Civilian council member Mabuki Haruno didn't know what the Hyuga head was talking about or why it seemed that this Akihiko person was such a big deal besides the fact he was the son of the daimyo of Whirlpool. Mabuki was a fair-skinned woman with shoulder-length, blonde hair with a single bang that fell down into her face. She had green eyes and wore a white chipao dress with 3 red circular designs at the bottom of the front of her dress as well as the back. Underneath the dress she wore a pink 3/4 length pants along with brown sandals instead of the common and standard blue sandals. What does it matter that Akihiko Uzumaki is the batosai? What is a batosai anyway? I've never heard of him. And what does it matter that he's leading this Central Guardians or whatever? I'm pretty sure that someone like Hokage-sama or Uchiha-sama can take care of him, she said looking at both men with a clueless smile on her face. Fugaku Uchiha, the head of the Uchiha clan and sole leader of the Konoha military police force, just ignored the useless woman. Fugaku had short, black hair that reached to his shoulders and onyx-colored eyes, with visible creases seen below them that made them even more pronounced whenever he adopted a stern look, which was mostly all of the time. He wore a simple green kimono with gray pants which had his clan's insignia marked on the back. Fugaku was a very serious and prominent man. He was very egotistical whenever his clan came into play of any conversation, just like the rest of his stuck-up, clan members. He also had a short temper which was slowly being shown as the meeting progressed. Fugaku never liked admitting things, but this time he was between a rock and a hard place. The Uchiha were the most powerful clan in Konohagakure, along with the Hyuga. Their clan was feared and admired far and wide and they lived up to their reputation whenever they were deployed on missions or wars. And they always returned victorious. But many Uchiha have fought the Uzumaki clan before, and for some reason they always seem to lose. The humiliation of losing despite their victories and reputation made the Uchiha clan constantly challenge the Uzumaki when they were comrades way back. Every single time, they lost. Then the news came over when one day the Uchiha clan asked them of how they gained so much power, so they could be able to obtain it for themselves. The Uzumaki clan merely told them that they were the direct descendants of the Rikudo Sennin, or the Sage of the Six Paths, 3, and inherited the bloodline of longevity, regeneration, and sealing arts from the father of shinobi. Even though the Uchiha clan was also a descendant of the Rikudo Sennin, they knew that they could never beat the Uzumaki. That thought made Fugaku fume as an old wound started to open up on his ego. Meanwhile, the Hokage was just shaking his head in disbelief at Mabuki's stupidity. Hiruzen again questioned the second Hokage's action of creating the civilian council. He had been doing that numerous of times over the years. I am afraid that is not the case, Haruno-san. The Sandaime said as he started to rub his temple to cool his ever-growing annoyance. I am an old man, and to be completely honest with myself, I doubt that even if I was in my prime, I would be no match for even one of the members of the Rokukyoshi. For Rokukyoshi? Asked one of the civilians. The Hokage nodded. Yes, the 6 great masters. They are a group of samurai that are recognized as the masters of their respective fields. They each wear a coat of the masters as proof of their power. What do you mean by that, Lord Hokage? Asked another civilian. Hiruzen sighed before he slid open a cabinet to his desk and pulled out his smoking pipe. He set it alight with a mini fire jutsu before he put the pipe in his mouth and proceeded forward. There are 6 coats that are said to have been made by the Sage of Six Paths himself. He presented these coats to his original 6 disciples, and each one of them specialized in one of the 6 great ninja arts: ninjutsu, genjutsu, taijutsu, kenjutsu, senjutsu, and fuinjutsu. Since the creation of the ninja arts, these coats have been passed down from master to master. There are only 2 ways for the coat and the title of master to be passed down. Either by the current master of a field will willingly pass down the title, or by someone stronger killing the current master and claiming the coat by force. The seriousness of the situation finally settled through the thick skulls of most of the civilians in the room, and many of them were scared, along with the shinobi council as well. What do the Uzumaki clan wish of us? A civilian council member asked quite nervously. The Hokage blew out a ring of smoke from his pipe before he answered. They wish to re-establish their friendship with us. This greatly relaxed many of the council, but some couldn't help but feel that there was a catch to all of this. They were right to think so. But, Hiruzen said sharply, instantly thwarting the council's moment of relaxation, they wish to enact a clan restoration act with a single clan of Konohagakure. This caused the council to once again explode into a frenzy of murmurings. The shinobi clans did not like how this meeting had gone from bad to take a turn for the worse. The CRA had been banished since the Second Great Ninja War, because of how Konoha's clans were not gaining any profit or benefit of the arranged marriages whatsoever. So they steadily complied to the Nidaime, stating that they would leave the Hidden Leaf village unless he got rid of the CRA. So he did. But despite of what happened in the past, they told themselves that this was the alleged Uzumaki clan, and many took this into consideration and wondered who their heirs would be paired off to. As if the third could read their minds, he suddenly spoke with a loud and clear voice. Although Akihiko was the original heir to take the throne of daimyo from his father, he has quite brazenly stated to us, and most likely his father, that he would not become the next daimyo of Whirlpool. Hiruzen then smiled fondly with his old eyes glinting mischievously. So he has passed on the title of daimyo onto his nephew, Naruto. Silence filled the council room impossibly fast. Surprisingly, no one had anything to say, even though the civilian council despised the young blonde boy. The reason being was because the civilian council was thoroughly conflicted. Some were so angry that they hadn't anything to say. Some felt guilty, ashamed, and confused all in one as they had treated the boy that was seemingly now the most important child of Konoha. Heck, he could even be the most important child of the elemental nations. The shinobi side of the council felt an unimaginable wave of guilt coursing through their bodies. They weren't mean towards the whiskered child like the villagers were, because they all knew that the boy was the Kyubi no Yoko's jailer, and not the demon itself. But they did not do anything for the boy when he needed their help in his times of need. That thought alone caused guilt to pierce their hearts. A woman stood up from her seat on the shinobi portion of the council. Her name was Sum Inuzuka, the head of the Inuzuka clan. Sum had an animalistic look, as did all of her clan members, for they were a fierce tracker and hunter ninja clan that worked with inbred ninja hounds. She had long, spiky, untamed brown hair, vertical slit-like pupils, and elongated canine teeth and nails. She also had her clan's fang markings on her cheeks as well as markings over her eyes and a dark shade of purple lipstick. She wore the standard outfit of a Konoha shinobi, which consisted of a green flak jacket and a black suit underneath with her sleeves rolled up and bandages wrapped around each of her legs. Strangely enough though, Sum didn't seem to wear the village's forehead protector. Sum was a very tough woman, and she often scolded her clan members when things were not up to par. She mostly scolded her youngest child, Kiba Inuzuka, for his actions like not taking his training seriously enough. But she was also a very reasonable and a kind-hearted shinobi. She wouldn't say that she didn't like Naruto Uzumaki. She actually did like the little troublemaker. He brought out the good and worse sides of her son that other kids just didn't seem to. She would always see them play together whenever she brought Kiba to the park, and would grin at the little rivalry that had somehow sparked between the two. Naruto was very tolerable in her eyes, minus the obnoxious pranks he pulled from time to time, and she would sometimes invite the young boy to have dinner with her and her son. She was very satisfied that no one in her clan objected to her decisions, for they also did not see any reason to hate the boy. He was just the jailer of a powerful demon, and that was all. Sim folded her arms before she spoke in a loud and clear voice. The Inuzuka clan wishes to initiate the clan restoration act with the Uzumaki clan. I will volunteer my eldest daughter, Hana Inuzuka, to marry the young pup Naruto Uzumaki. Everyone looked at the woman as if she had suddenly sprouted two heads. The Hokage knew that he would have to decline her request, but he was curious as to why the clan had wanted to marry off Naruto with her eldest and only daughter. Sim-san, I wish to know why you would enlist Hana as a candidate to be wed Naruto. Sarutobi asked curiously as he linked his hands together and placed them gently on his desk. It's simple really, Sim said causally, I like the kid. Everyone continued to stare at her in shock, and she sighed as she began to clarify it for them. The Inuzuka clan holds no bad relation towards the little brat. Sure, we lost some of our kin to the Kyuubi, but that's just it. We lost our loved ones to the Kyuubi and not Naruto Uzumaki. I don't think a little squirt like him is capable enough to kill hundreds of fully trained shinobi. The Sandaime smiled at the woman's declaration. It filled his heart with much joy that there were at least some people who thought of Naruto as Naruto instead of that wretched, nine-tailed fox. Although he didn't want to squander her decision, he knew he had to. Hiruzen was about to deny her request, but another voice interrupted him. It was Inoichi Yamanaka of the Yamanaka clan. Now Sim, I know we have been friends and comrades in arms for quite a while, but don't you think that Hana is a little too old for Naruto? Sim snapped her head to look at her cohort, who flinched under her feral gaze. What are you trying to say, Inoichi? She growled angrily. Inoichi held up his hands in surrender as he tried to calm down his friend. Now, Sim, I am only stating that your daughter is too old to marry a young child such as Naruto. Hana is 14 while Naruto is only 4 for Kami's sake. He then folded his arms as nervous sweat began to build on his brow. I just thought that Naruto needed to be married to a girl around his age. My daughter is only a month older than Naruto, so I figured that she would be a much better candidate to marry the young lad. What? Sim screamed as she slammed her hands on her desk. Are you saying that my daughter is insufficient to marry the pup than yours? Are you saying that you think that your daughter would be a much better wife than mine? No! No! Inoichi shouted as he quickly waved his hands frantically. That's not what I meant at all. I was talking about how my daughter would be better age-wise. But the trackerine seemed to ignore the blonde-haired man's pleas and started to advance towards him as she pulled up her sleeves. Already were Shikaku and Shibi standing to hold back the woman from pummeling the blonde into oblivion. As this squabbling was going on, Mabuki Haruno was grinning mischievously at the turn of events. She thought that if she could marry her daughter Sakura Haruno to the boy, then their family would be the richest civilian family alive. She would gain unimaginable fortune and would receive anything she desired. Unbeknownst to her, many of the civilian families were also thinking the same thing and argued of whose daughter would marry the soon-to-be Whirlpool daimyo. Hiruzen sighed as he rubbed his temples in annoyance. This meeting was getting far too noisy for his liking. First they hated Naruto, now they were suddenly eager to invite the boy into their families like he was the most important person in the world. It disgusted the Hokage to no end of how quickly people's minds seemed to change when wealth and fame were brought into play. He assumed that the Shinobi Council had a good explanation for their participation, but the civilian side was just despicable. The professor looked over to the head of the Hyuga clan, who just sent him an amused smile. It surprised him at first, for he has never seen the man smile in his presence despite earlier tonight, but he was brought out of it when Hayashi gestured his head towards the raging council. Yes, they still had more work to be done. Hiruzen blew out a cloud of smoke before he cleared his throat loudly to get the council's attention. Everyone quieted down and looked towards the elderly man, immediately stopping what they were doing. I am afraid I will have to decline everyone's offer of arranged marriage. The council began to murmur amongst themselves, confused and angry at the Hokage's declaration. The reason being is because the CRA with the Uzumaki clan has already been verified. The council's grumblings grew loudly and more pronounced when small shouts entered the fray. Shikaku, surprisingly, was the first one to speak up to news. I know that this is going to be troublesome, but who, pray tell, is participating in the CRA with the Uzumaki clan? Hiruzen was about to speak, but Hayashi interrupted him with a formal bow. Hokage-sama, may I? He asked. Sarutobi just smiled and waved his hand for the man to continue on. Hayashi nodded and once again addressed the crowd of nobles. The Uzumaki clan has enacted the Clan Restoration Act with the Hyuga clan because of special relations, so to speak. The stern man said as he folded his arms over his chest. This caused both sides to erupt into shouts and screams of disapproval. Sim broke out of Shikaku and Shibi's grasp and let go of Inoichi's collar and pointed an accusing finger at the prominent man. What? What is this special relationship do the Hyuga have with the Uzumaki? Hayashi just smirked, shocking many of the man's sudden display of emotion. It's simple. My wife was a good friend of Kushina Uzumaki, Naruto's mother. Many gasped at the sudden revelation of the boy's parents. Many, no, all of the villagers of the village hidden in the leaves knew of Kushina Uzumaki's name. How can they not? She was the great troublemaker Konoha had before Naruto became known to the world. She was called the red-hot-blooded habanero, and whenever people got on her bad side, well, let's just say that none was spared from her wrath. It's quite simple really, Hayashi said as his pale eyes were focused intently on the brash Inazuka woman. Kushina Uzumaki was the daughter of the daimyo of Whirlpool, and she and my wife knew each other very well actually. They were the best of friends, along with Fugaku-san's wife, Mikoto Uchiha. And since I have a daughter that is around Naruto's age, and since the Uzumaki clan knows of how close my wife was with Kushina-san, it gives the Hyuga clan a special connection with them. That was why the Uzumaki were so eager to accept our request to arrange a marriage of my daughter with the daimyo's grandson. If that's true then, why didn't Fugaku-sama volunteer to participate with the Uzumaki clan? A civilian member asked. Fugaku just linked his fingers together, as he stared down at Hayashi with a frosty glare. The man caught it, and sent it with one of his own. The two were once good friends along with the fourth Hokage, or Minato Namikaze. But ever since the three had been called to become the head of their clans or becoming Hokage, they haven't been able to reconnect like they once did. And when Minato died, it somehow served the bond between Fugaku and Hayashi, making them see each other as mortal enemies. Although, their wives are still best friends unlike the two powerful men were. Because I have 2 sons. And one is many years ahead of young Naruto. Fugaku answered coldly. Indeed. Hayashi said before he sent one final glare at the Uchiha head before returning his gaze back to the council members. I have legal documentation stating that this marriage is final. Hokage-sama, if you would please? The pale-eyed man asked politely as he looked back at his leader. Hiruzen nodded before his hands quickly flashed through seals and a huge stack of papers suddenly materialized right in front of him. The Hokage snapped his fingers and 3 ANBU members appeared in front of his desk. Please pass this out to everyone in the council. The 3 nodded once before they each separated the papers and in a flash they were evenly distributed among the council. Sarutobi smiled gratefully at the 3 and gave them a nod. Thank you very much for your help. You are all dismissed for the night. Hi, Hokage-sama. They said before they disappeared in a flicker. The council looked through the paper and many were frustrated at the turn of events. The papers were in fact authentic because of the Hokage seal stamped on each paper, and those that knew of Hayashi's handwriting could clearly see that the penmanship was in fact real and not a counterfeit. Hayashi looked up triumphantly as he saw the Hyuga elders that were accompanying him look very angered and flustered. They now knew that their plans that they had in store for Hinata had immediately flown out of the window, and they could do nothing about it because of the rules clearly stated on the packet, and for the fear of invoking the wrath of the Uzumaki clan if they continue their diabolical ways. Hiruzen smiled as he watched the council looked baffled at the newest situation that was presented in front of them. He cleared his throat, further silencing the council's mumblings. Now then, are there any objections for what has been brought forth to us? The council members looked at each other, but didn't say anything. Sarutobi grinned. Very well then. I call this meeting adjourned. And with that, the Sandaime banged his gavel for the final time that night, dismissing the meeting of Konoha's council. Naruto Uzumaki started to slowly open his eyes as he awakened from his slumber. 1 minute he was dreaming about slurping down the biggest ramen bowl in the world, the next, he was being woken up by a lot of swaying and swishing. He sat up slowly and started to rub his eyes. Where the heck was he? The orphanage didn't sway, at least, that's what he thought he knew. His vision slowly started to refocus as he took in his surroundings. He was in a room, a big room. It was dimly lit, and had wooden floors and walls with a lot of fancy things in it. There was a giant wardrobe to his left next by a large bookshelf filled to the brim with books and scrolls. He looked down, and saw that he was in a large king-size bed with a white bed covering that was beautifully designed with vines that spiraled and twisted on the cover to add to its effect. Naruto gently thumbed the fabric and his eyes widened. It was silk, that kind of stuff that lots of rich people wore. So, I see that you're finally awake. A voice suddenly said, causing Naruto to snap his head in its direction. Mornin' Squirt, how are you feeling? It was a man that was sitting in a corner of the room with red, semi-spiky hair that had 2 long bangs that stopped a little ways from his jaw. He was wearing a red forehead protector that Naruto had seen Konoha's shinobi wear. But the symbol had a swirling maelstrom instead of a leaf. He wore a white t-shirt and baggy black pants with blue sandals. Naruto noticed that the man seemed very strong by his well-built body that rippled under his t-shirt as he read a very large book. Even though the blonde lad was slightly put off by the mysterious man's appearance, his curiosity weighed a little bit higher than his fear. Who the hell are you? And where am I? Naruto asked quite rudely. This only made the man laugh heartily, making the young boy become even more confused, but was silenced when the guy stood up and made his way over to him. Naruto was squirming away as much as he could, but he couldn't get far because his back hit against the wall, and his body was still sore from the mob of villagers that beat him up a few days ago. Don't worry, kid, the man said reassuringly as he pulled up a stool that was just on the other side of the lamp that was softly lighting up the room and sat next by the bed. I'm not gonna hurt you. This greatly calmed Naruto, and he slowly began to relax his sore body. Anyway, my name's Akihiko Uzumaki, and as for where you are right now, you're on a boat. the man named Akihiko stated with a large grin on his face. Eh? Naruto screamed in shock before he suddenly jumped up to his feet on the bed and pointed an accusing finger at the man. But Uzumaki is my last name, why were you stealing my name, huh? Akihiko just laughed at his nephew's obliviousness, as he held his stomach in pain of how hard he was laughing. And no doubt about it, the ginger said with his laughter subsiding a bit, you are just like your mother in more ways than one. Ha! Naruto's eyes instantly brightened. My mother? You know who my mom is? Can you tell me please? He asked in an almost frantic voice. Naruto had never known anything about his parents. To an orphan boy like himself, knowing who your parents were was the most precious information you could ever dream of having. And now this man, this Akihiko guy, knew who his mother was. He just had to know, he just had to. Know her? Of course I do. She was my sister after all. Akihiko smiled and folded his arms proudly. Naruto's eyes widened in shock while his mouth went agape. He pointed a shaky finger at Akihiko who was still smiling at him. And my mom was your sister? So that means, the batosai nodded before his smile turned warm and gentle. He stood up towering over the youngest Uzumaki and placed a large hand on Naruto's wild blonde hair. Yep, I'm your uncle, Naruto. And I've been waiting to meet you for a very long time now, said boy stared up into his uncle's eyes. He could not believe it. He had an actual relative standing right there in front of him, and he was the brother of his mother. The thought of having a family member after 4 long years of solitude made the blonde develop tears in his eyes before they spilled over his tanned, whiskered cheeks. He embraced Akihiko and clung onto him like he was his lifeline before he cried his heart out. Akihiko frowned as he tried to hold his tears back before he held his nephew in a tight grip, never wanting to let him go. The room was filled with Naruto muffled cries of happiness. The gingerhead man picked up the boy and started to walk out of the room with the lad held tightly in his arms. Come on Naruto, Akihiko said in a strangled voice. His tears had finally created small rivers over his cheeks, but he was trying his hardest to not cry along with his nephew. You've still got 2 more family members to meet. After a few minutes or so, Naruto calmed down enough to speak. Really? Who are they? He choked out. Akihiko smiled down at the boy and hugged him tighter. 2 old geezers who love you very much. That's who. And the 2 reunited Uzumakis walked down the dimly light corridors in comfortable silence. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise as he was carried into the dining room. The walls were painted with a beautiful evening color, and it complemented the rising sun that could be seen through the large window that was on a side of the dining room. There were large orange banners that hung on the walls, displaying a large blue maelstrom symbol in the center of each banner. There was a long wooden dining table in the middle of the room that was blanketed with a white covering that was designed beautifully with pure silk. And to complete the table were red pillows around the table that signified reserved sitting areas for special people. Naruto's eyes wandered the room, completely awestruck by its beauty. He then saw servants that were running in and out of double doors that seemed to be where the kitchen lay, as they frantically set the tables. And to his growing surprise, some of them waved at him with friendly smiles as they passed by. Akihiko suddenly lowered Naruto to stand on his own 2 feet, and it caused Naruto to stare at him in fear like the man was going to leave him. His fears were put to rest when the ginger bent down on one knee and ruffled his spiky blonde head with a hand. Don't worry, Squirt, I'm not planning to leave you for a second. He grinned before he stood up and took one of Naruto's small hands into his big ones to reassure the frightened boy. The batosai then led them towards the dining table and they sat on a pillow that was on the left side of the dining table. The blonde Uzumaki saw his uncle flag down some servants and started to whisper something to him. He figured that it was probably grown-up talk and a kid like him shouldn't eavesdrop on their conversation. So he started to focus on other things that he might have missed inside the dining room. He occasionally saw the pristine whiteness of the kitchen, and a really chubby man dressed in white with a big hat yell at some of the servants if they did something wrong. He yelled at them a lot. But Naruto's cerulean eyes suddenly stopped when he saw 2 men standing by the door that he and his uncle previously came through. They stood big and tall, dressed in strange black armor with the same red Hittite Akihiko was wearing. Naruto's eyes fell on their swords that were strapped to their waists. He was slightly put off by them and clutched onto his uncle's arm from comfort. But he calmed down a bit when the 2 men gave him a friendly smile and a nod when they caught him looking at him. This caused the boy to tilt his head in confusion. Those are samurai, Naruto. Said boy turned around to see his uncle Akihiko smiling at him warmly. Samurai? The man nodded. Yep. They are special people who perfect the art of kenjutsu, or sword fighting. Akihiko looked up at the ceiling as his violet eyes adorned a faraway look. They never need to use jutsu because they can be able to take down their enemies far swiftly than without them. Isn't that cool? Naruto's eyes lit up like it was Christmas, and his lips stretched into a large grin. Super cool. Uncle Akihiko, do you think I'd make a good samurai? He asked excitedly. Akihiko grinned at his nephew before he wrapped the boy into a headlock and started to give him playful noogies. You bet. And I'm sure you're gonna be great someday. Dadaberu. Naruto blinked in surprise before he grinned also. Dadaberu? Yours is just like mine. Dadabeo. Akihiko's grin grew tenfold, and his noogies grew rougher on the blonde's skull. Eh? So you're copying me, huh? the ginger asked mischievously. Huh? No way, you're copying me. Naruto pouted angrily as he tried to get out of his uncle's strong grasp. The two struggled and wrestled with each other, becoming frustrated with each other until someone whistled, making them stop in mid-fight. Naruto was biting Akihiko's left hand while the man was pulling the boy's right ear as he still held the boy in a headlock. I wake up from a peaceful nap, and what do I find? My son wrestling with my grandson who hasn't even recovered from those horrid wounds that is marred over his young body, a grouchy yet feminine voice shouted. Both males turned their heads towards the entryway of the dining room to see an elderly woman with her hands placed on her hips as she looked at them with a stern expression on her face. She had short, red semi-spiky hair which stopped at her neck. She had sharp, violet eyes and slightly visible creases at the corners of her eyes and her mouth. She wore a purple kimono-like dress that was worn under a white haori, and black sandals. Her stern look suddenly turned into a glare, making Naruto and Akihiko flinch in fear before they quickly untangled themselves from each other and sat on their knees with their hands in their laps. The two found the wooden floors interesting as they sweated substantially. Sorry, they both mumbled in unison as they squirmed in their seats uncomfortably. The elderly woman sighed before she rubbed her temples. Honestly, I expect this from Naruto since he is just a child, but you Akihiko? You're a grown man for Kami's sake. Naruto fidgeted some more in his seat before he built up the courage to look up into the old woman's fiery eyes. Excuse me, but who are you? In a flash, Naruto suddenly found himself in the iron-tight grip of this woman who was nuzzling his golden blonde mane of hair, as she squeezed him tighter in her death grip. Ah. Aren't you the cutie? My name's Harumi Uzumaki and I am your grandmother. She swooned as she continued to crush the boy who was struggling in her grip. She was surprisingly strong even though she was elderly. Can't breathe. Naruto wheezed as he weakly tried to push himself away from the woman. He was saved however when another person placed a hand on Harumi's shoulder, making her loosen her grip enough to allow the blonde access to oxygen again. It was an elderly man with slightly tanned skin, a few wrinkles, and sharp, pronounced violet eyes. He had long white hair that cascaded down to mid-back, a long mustache with a very long white beard that had a red bow tied at the end of it. He wore a long-sleeved black kimono, A/N, think of Bleach's Soul Reapers, that was held together by a white obi sash. He also wore wooden sandals and a white haori that clung at the shoulders and draped over his back. The white haori bore the blue maelstrom symbol that seemed to pop up everywhere around the room. Haruchan, the old man said as he smiled at the old woman with kindness showing in his old eyes. Let the boy breathe for a minute. I haven't even introduced myself yet. Harumi glared at the newcomer with a piercing look before she sighed and reluctantly set Naruto back down on his own 2 feet with a huff. You're lucky you're my husband, Ria. If it was anyone else, I would have whacked them for saying that I should let go of my grandchild. She pouted before she stalked over to her seat on the other side of the long dining table, sitting across from Akihiko. Ryu chuckled at his wife's stubborn attitude before he turned his attention to the small boy next to him. The boy was looking up at him with curious yet awestruck blue eyes that made the old daimyo smile in satisfaction. Truly, he does bear the uncanny resemblance of his mother, he thought before he reached out a hand towards the blonde boy. Come now, Naruto-kun, I am sure that you have plenty of questions that would like to have answered, yes? The boy nodded vigorously, making the old man laugh heartily. All right then. Ryo led the whiskered child over to his seat, which was at the end of the long table, and he sat cross-legged on the red pillow. He smiled warmly at his grandson as he patted his legs. Come now, sit on my lap. Don't be frightened, for I will not hurt you. Naruto hesitated for a moment, his mind decisive and unsure. But once he saw the kindness of this old man's eyes and how he had a nice and warm air around him, it calmed him greatly, and he proceeded to get into the man's lap. He was shocked at first by how warm Ryo's body was, and Naruto was even more surprised when he found himself liking the warmth that was being given to him. When he was back in Konoha, he never felt the warmth of having a mother or a father or any relative. It was always cold all by his lonesome without anyone giving him the time of day to even hold his hand. Now he was reunited with his long-lost family again, and they were showering him with all of their attention in a good kind of way. That thought made Naruto's heart swell with joy, and he snuggled deeper into his newfound grandfather's chest with a giant grin plastered on his face. Ryo smiled brightly at Naruto's reaction and started to gently stroke his spiky blonde head soothingly. It saddened him to know that Konohagakure did not treat his grandchild with the respect he so rightly deserved, and it angered him to no end of how they treated an innocent young boy so brutally. If it weren't for the CRA contract with the Hyuga clan, he would have marched up to that wretched village himself and burned it to the ground. No child of the Uzumaki would be treated unjustly without dealing with wrath of the clan first. Ryo cleared his throat before he patted the blonde's head to further gain his attention. I suppose it would be wise to formally introduce myself. Ryo smiled and jabbed a thumb into his chest. I am known as the daimyo of the Whirlpool nation and the village hidden in the whirlpools. I am the leader of the hailed and fearsome clan of the Uzumaki. But my name is Ryo Uzumaki, and I am your grandfather Naruto-kun. Naruto's eyes sparkled and he scrambled out of his grandfather's lap to stand up with a large smile slapped across his face. Whoa! You're that cool and you're my grandpa? He suddenly started to bounce up and down in his spot as he bombarded Ryo with a ton of questions. Hey, how powerful are you? Can you beat a Kage? Have you ever taken down an army? What's your favorite food? Why's your hair so long? Ryu along with Harumi and Akihiko laughed at the boy's bountiful energy. Yep, he certainly was like his mother. I am very powerful, yes I can take down a Kage, I have taken down a fleet of 5,000 shinobi strong, my favorite food is pork ramen, and my hair is long because I want it to be. Ryu answered with an amused smile. Does that answer all of your questions, Naruto-kun? Said boy nodded vigorously before he brought up another question. You like ramen like me? Ryu nodded and was about to answer but he was interrupted by his wife. Of course he does. We all do. We are Uzumaki after all. Harumi smiled hugely. Even though I'm not an Uzumaki by blood, I still love ramen just as much as any other Uzumaki. Naruto was astounded. He had family who liked ramen just as much as he did. Those who saw him eat ramen back in Konoha would have said that he acted like a gluttonous pig, and they would have teased him of how fitting it was to see the demon brat behave like an animal. It still stung but he hoped that his new family wouldn't think that his eating habits weren't too overbearing. Naruto smiled and was about to ask something else food-oriented but he stopped himself when he remembered something. Something he wanted to know desperately since the moment he could talk. His parents. His eyes casted down, and he went into a state of awkward silence. Why wasn't he speaking? Here he was with a group of people he knew, his mother, and possibly his father. He craved for this piece of information for years, just to have some sort of closure in his crummy life. But somehow, he couldn't find the right words to say what he felt. Ryu saw the hesitation and silence his grandson had suddenly gone into. He looked depressed and remorsefully, and it ripped the old man's heart in two to see his kin into such an awful state. He looked to his son who only nodded and did his wife. They all thought the same thing. Your mother's name was Kushina Uzumaki. The daimyo began, catching the young boy's attention as he looked up at his grandfather. She was the princess of the land of Whirlpool, wife of the fourth Hokage, and my precious daughter. Naruto's entire world froze within an instant. What did he just say? He hoped that his ears weren't playing some cruel joke on him because he would be severely annoyed if he heard his grandfather wrong. And my dad is the fourth Hokage? Naruto said barely above a whisper as he turned as white as a ghost. All three Uzumaki nodded with gentle smiles on their faces. Old man Sarutobi must have not told you that, huh? Akihiko grinned. Don't see why not though. From what I've heard, having any relationship with the great Minato Namikaze would have earned you big shot rankings in the elemental nations. Naruto just couldn't believe it. His mother was a royal princess, and his father was the great fourth Hokage. He looked at his family, and they looked back at him with smiling faces. He looked for any deceit but he only found kindness and truth in their eyes. His heart swelled with happiness, and he was about to pounce on them when another daunting thought made its way present into the recess of his mind. The blond lad began to fidget with his hands as his eyes flint hesitantly between his family and the table. If you guys really are my family, then why was I in the orphanage? Didn't you want me? He asked in a whisper, not looking at his grandfather. Before Ryu could speak, Harumi spoke for him. She slammed her hands on the table, rattling the plates and silverware. Never, ever, believe for a second that we didn't want you, Naruto. The leaf had not contacted us in years, so we thought that the newborn son she gave birth to died along with her through an unfortunate occurrence. Harumi bent over the table, picked up Naruto from Ryu's lap, and cradled him in her arms like a newborn babe. Once we did find out you were alive, our village was still in ruins from the Second Great Ninja War. We had to rebuild everything, including our army, back to its former glory. Once we were finished, many years had passed, and that's when me and Masayoshi went out to get you from that hellhole of a place. Akihiko said, finishing up his mother's sentence with folded arms and a scowl. Bunch of idiots. Naruto looked towards the man that was his uncle, the woman that was his grandmother, and the man that was his grandfather. He didn't understand why the village said he was dead, but he didn't care right now. After long, excruciating years of being exiled, lonely, mistreated, abused, scorned, ostracized, and horrid other things, he finally had a family that actually cared about him, and Naruto had never been happier. Grandpa, can you tell me more about my mom and my dad? Naruto smiled at the man hopefully as he snuggled further into his grandmother's arms. Ryu smiled. Of course, Naruto-kun, anything for you. He looked up at the ceiling and thought long and hard. Let's see where to start. He suddenly brightened and stroked his long white beard with long, lazy strokes. Ah yes, that will do nicely indeed. Harumi and Akihiko smiled happily as the older Uzumaki began to tell the little boy everything there was to know about his mother and father. They even added their own little input here and there when the man seemed to get stuck. They all talked and laughed until their dinner was served. Naruto yawned tiredly as he clung onto his grandmother's hand as they walked down a corridor. They had all just finished dinner and Harumi took him out when his grandfather and uncle had to discuss some important things. It was something about some sort of coronation or whatever. But the tanned, whiskered child couldn't believe the spread that they had for dinner that evening. They were served rice balls, sashimi, grilled fish, sushi, dango, zensai, red bean soup, and dumplings, tons of rice, grilled meat, and even more yummy stuff that Naruto could ever dream of. They even had some food that he didn't recognize, yet they still tasted amazing. Now the happily full boy with a fairly distended belly was walking with Harumi towards the medical area where the ship's nurse worked. The old woman had told him that he needed to get those bruises and cuts checked out so they wouldn't become infectious. Naruto didn't argue, for he was still immersed in the afterglow of having a full-course meal for the very first time in his young life. Well, here we are, the red-headed woman said as they stopped in front of a lone door. There was a white plaque above the door with the word nurse's office etched onto it. The dim lights illuminated the sign, giving it an eerie look that made Naruto a bit unnerved. Light was coming out of the bottom of the door, meaning that someone was inside. Harumi knocked on the door 3 times and waited. The 2 Uzumaki heard loud grumblings from inside and something falling with a loud crash. Heavy footsteps loudly lumbered towards the door until it stopped with the door suddenly swinging open and slapped hard against the wall, almost making it fly off of its hinges. It was a fair-skinned woman who was leaning against the door's frame with an entire bottle of sake in her hand as she gave them both an annoyed look. She had glossy light brown hair that was tied into a high ponytail that reached a little over her shoulder, and piercing black eyes. She had a lithe and lean build with slim arms, taut legs and abdominal muscles. She wore a white lab coat with a sleeves red tank top that stopped above her navel, a smooth and black short skirt, and black shinobi sandals with heels. Lady Harumi, the woman spoke with a slurred voice as a frown adorned her face. To what do I owe the honor? Are you sick or something? Quite the opposite, Manami. Harumi stated with a flat tone and an annoyed glare. She absolutely hated to see such a beautiful woman resort to drinking even of her high medical status in Whirlpool. Oh, how the generations have failed, the wife of the daimyo thought as she sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose to quell her growing anger. I need you to heal my grandson, she said as she gently pushed the boy forward, who was staring at Manami with curious eyes. He has experienced some unfortunate wounds during his time at Konohagakure no Sato. Manami raised a brow. Unfortunate, huh? She bent down to get onto Naruto's eyes level and gave him a once-over. She looked back into his eyes to see him staring right back at her. So, what's your name, kid? The boy beamed and jabbed a thumb into his chest. The name's Naruto Uzumaki, he said before he suddenly pinched his nose and waved a hand into front of his face. And boy, does your breath stink, lady. You reek. A large vein bursted onto Manami's forehead, and she punched the top of the boy's spiky blonde head hard. Naruto cried out in pain and tried to soothe the smarting whelp that was on his head. Hey, what gives you, old hag? He screamed childishly with watered eyes. Old hag? Manami bit out while her shoulders trembled with anger. She gave the boy an intimate death glare that made Naruto sweat nervously and gulp in fear. He quickly hid behind Harumi, who was trying to hold in her laughter. Alright, Manami, settled down. Harumi chuckled as she wiped away her tears. He's only a boy, cut him some slack. And besides, he needs your help and he is your patient this evening. Said woman just snorted before she stalked inside the room, chugging down her sake with greedy gulps. Harumi smiled at Naruto, who was still quivering in fear behind her leg, and led the boy inside despite his protests. Don't worry, my little Naruto-kun, Harumi said as she tried to reassure the quivering boy, despite her cold exterior. Manami is the best nurse you can find in the entire Whirlpool nation. Her family has been serving ours for generations, so she's a very close friend of ours, and soon to be yours too. Naruto looked up at his grandmother before looking back at the drunkard woman who had plopped down on a rolling stool with a heavy thud. She was glaring at him while a nice pink blush stained her cheeks from all of the alcohol. She was slightly teetering in her seat as she clutched onto her sake bottle like it was her lifeline. The blonde felt that they wouldn't get along too well, considering the fact that she looked as if she was going to throw the bottle right at him. Hey you brat! Naruto jumped, and was brought out of his reverie when he saw Manami address him. She gave him one last once-over with leering black eyes before waving him over with a lazy hand. Come over here so we can get this crap over and done with. Naruto gave his grandmother one last look before he went over to Manami, climbed onto the examination table that was next to her. Take off your shirt. What for? Naruto said cautiously as he gripped his shirt hard. Manami put in the earplugs of her stethoscope into her ears before she sighed in annoyance. So I can help you get better, you brat. I am a nurse after all. Naruto looked at her skeptically before reluctantly pulled up his shirt over his head and set it beside him. Both of the women gasped once they saw the physical state the young boy was in. He had welts and bruises littered across his young body. 3 long cuts slashed across his torso and had an angry red glow to them, like if at the slightly touch they would reopen again. Manami stood up, grabbed his shoulders, and slightly twisted him so she could take a look at his back. He had a particularly giant bruise that was the size of a shoe that started from his left shoulder and stopped at mid-back. Manami's eyes widened before she let go of Naruto's shoulders to look at him straight in the eye. Who did this to you, Naruto? She asked in a quiet whisper. Naruto ducked his head to avoid the woman's piercing gaze. His small fingers unconsciously started to graze along his 3 cuts on his torso, causing him to wince in pain. The villagers back at the leaf. He answered in a small voice. They kinda sorta hate my guts and they attacked me a lot whenever I got too close to them. He rubbed the back of his head as his eyes closed. That was known infamously in the hidden leaf. They called me demon brat or monster all the time and I only pulled a few pranks. I don't think that's like a monster, is it? Manami just narrowed her eyes at the boy's story with folded arms. It seemed that the leaf was becoming too chaotic to attack a child that had no idea what was inside him. It's more of a gift than a curse, Manami thought as she pinched the bridge of her nose. With the amplified chakra that is distributed throughout his body, thanks to his tenant, his healing factor has increased tenfold, truly a magnificent benefit to his person. But the others doesn't seem to think so, the idiots. Harumi, on the other hand, was seething with rage. Her teeth ground together, her blood boiled, and her violet eyes glinted dangerously as she thought of the many deaths she was going to inflict the next time she went to that damnable place. They dare do that to my grandson over something that he has no control over? The old woman's chakra spiked dangerously high, giving way to her anger. Hiruzen Sarutobi, you better have a good explanation for when I come back, because I'm going after your sorry ass first. Hiruzen was busy signing some papers of the many documents that was stationed on his desk. He sighed, but he shook as a dreaded cold feeling suddenly washed over him. He looked around his office to find the source of the sudden coldness, but there was nothing there. He had a bad feeling in the pit of his stomach that something unfortunate was going to happen to him soon. The next few days flew by fast for Naruto. He spent a lot of time with his family, as much as he could, to make up for those 4 long years of solitude. The blonde really liked his family, even if his uncle Akihiko always seemed to get annoyed fairly easily. Naruto also warmed up to Manami, even though the woman always got mad at him whenever he was annoying her too much. Apparently that happened a lot. Even though she had a gruff exterior, she was really kind-hearted and nice once she warmed up to him. She always took care of him whenever he got hurt, and fussed over him when he couldn't take his medicine before she ultimately forced it down his throat. The blonde Uzumaki also spent most of his time with his grandfather, Ryu Uzumaki. The daimyo told him many stories of his mother and his new home at Whirlpool country. The boy was fascinated by them and couldn't wait to see his new home. His grandfather had told him that they would be arriving soon in a few hours. Naruto was also told by his family that since he was the prince of Whirlpool, he would be instructed in both samurai and ninja arts, and had many other duties as a prince. The boy had always wanted to be a ninja, but being a samurai as well sounded like a pretty sweet deal to him. His mother, Kushina Uzumaki, had been trained in both arts, and she was amazingly strong from what his family and some of the samurai on the ship told him. The samurai were very nice to him, unlike the villagers at the Hidden Leaf Village, and they always treated him with the utmost respect. They even went as far as calling him Naruto-sama or Uzumaki-sama. That made the boy very uncomfortable, but his grandfather reassured by saying that it was a form showing their respect to him and the Uzumaki family. Ryo also told him that he had better get used to it because he was going to hear those names a lot for most of his life. Right now the boy was clutching the bars of the rails at the front of the boat as he gazed out at the sea with a happy expression on his face. He had 2 samurai guards by his side, but he was busy enjoying the gentle caress of the gentle winds in his spiky blonde hair as he neared his new home. He sniffed the air and smelled the saltiness of the sea and the purity of the air. He was brought out of his relaxation, however, when he heard the guards say Ryo-sama before leaving his side. The boy instantly whipped around and latched onto his grandfather like a koala bear hugging a eucalyptus tree. Grandpa! Naruto beamed as he tightened his hold with glee. Ryo laughed heartily at his grandson's behavior before ruffling the boy's head with a large tan hand. Good morning, Naruto-kun. I hope you took your medicine when you got out of bed this morning. Or I might have to tell Manami to give you another shot. Naruto's face instantly went pale as he shook his head vigorously. A couple of days ago Naruto refused to take his disgusting and vile medicine Manami offered him. She smiled at him with an evil glint in her eyes and she said it was fine, but before the boy could celebrate, Manami quickly pulled out a syringe and drove the needle into his arm, making him yelp in pain. After that, Naruto never complained about taking his medicine, and his grandparents and uncle loved teasing him about it. No! Naruto screamed. I took my medicine, promise, Ryo chuckled. Good, now please go change into your formal kimono, Naruto-kun. We are almost arriving upon Nagisa Port. As soon as we arrive, we will take a carriage from there to the city of Whirlpool Country, Kothar. And from there on we will ride horses to the palace square. Naruto tilted his head in confusion with closed eyes. Hey Grandpa, why don't we take the carriages to the palace square? Because Naruto-kun, Ryo explained as he pulled Naruto away from his torso and held the boy in his strong arms. The people of Whirlpool want to see their new prince. They loved your mother, and I'm positive they will love you just as much. Now come, the new prince must be dressed in the right attire to greet his loyal subjects. Naruto was sitting in a carriage with his grandfather already waiting inside. Their carriage was beautifully made of sleek dark oak wood. It had white silk curtains on each of the carriage's frames with red dragons and whirlpools delicately stitched onto them. And to add the final touch, there was the Whirlpool's banner that was pinned gloriously on a pole that was on top of the carriage. The boy heard a few words being conversed outside before the carriage shook and was hoisted up into the air. Naruto was uncomfortable at first, what with him not attached to the ground, but he slowly regained his bearings and calmed down. The blonde was wearing an orange yukata that was held together by a red obi sash and had a big folded bow in the back. He also wore wooden sandals just like his grandfather. Suddenly there was a loud chorus of noises coming from outside of the carriage. Naruto leaned over to one of the curtains and was about to pull it open, but he looked at Ryo as if for permission. The old daimyo chucked and waved an approving hand. Go ahead Naruto-kun, take a look. The boy nodded and moved the curtains a little bit to allow his head to poke through. The Whirlpool fleet had arrived to the cheering crowds as many locals had received word of the arrival of the lost prince and hurried to meet the voyagers. It was a surreal experience for young Naruto. He had been despised and mistreated for as long as he could remember in his short life. But these people clapped and cheered with glee as the carriages were carried by, and when the whiskered child poked his head through the curtains the cheers and claps roared even louder. As they were carried over the long bridge that led to another part of Whirlpool country, he saw the sign that said Great Uzumaki Bridge in bold, black kanji letters. And he was surprised further when he saw that there were cheering crowds on either sides of the great bridge, but nothing prepared the boy for what he saw next as they reached the end of the bridge and got on their designated horses. As they passed the massive, beautifully handcrafted golden gates with a samurai escort to keep the raving crowd at bay, Naruto got one of the biggest surprises of his life. "Welcome to Palace Square, kid," a gruff yet familiar voice said as he rode up next to the gaping boy on a black stallion. It was Akihiko, dressed in an elegant red and white kimono with a long white haori with blue trims and edges with the kanji for kenjutsu on his back, a sword that had a black, red, and gold hilt that was placed in a black sheath and was strapped to his hip. Palace Square was a cluster of perfectly made wooden houses and markets. The streets bustled with people and patrolling samurai alike. Traditional tories, Japanese gates, 5, stood high above the houses and markets, and had different names written on their white plaques to signify what district a person was in. Naruto also rode by farming areas where there were green lush fields and rice paddy fields as far as the eye could see. Farmers were hard at work, but they seemed very happy as they were doing their laborious tasks. Some even looked up from their work to wave excitedly at Naruto before returning to their work. "We treat all people of all walks of life here with equal respect." Naruto looked up at his uncle when he spoke. "No matter if you're from a rich family or a poor family, in our eyes everyone is worth something, no matter what status you may have. That is the Uzumaki code that all Uzumaki have followed for many generations." He smiled down at Naruto before he ruffled his head. "Come on, we're falling behind everyone else, so let's catch up." Akihiko snapped his rein and his horse neighed before it galloped after the samurai entourage. Naruto blinked as he watched his uncle ride away on his black stallion. Something suddenly clicked in his brain as he realized that he didn't even know what his horse looked like. He was on a tall, chestnut-colored horse with white markings on its snout, legs, hooves, and the underside of its belly. It had an excessive amount of long white hair on its lower legs, but that made it look even more magnificent. Its muscles bunched and rippled under its pelt, and it pawed at the dirt with a hoof as if it was annoyed that it wasn't in motion. Naruto scratched the back of his head in confusion before he slowly gripped the black rein and stared at it quizzically. Cha? The boy mumbled as he cracked the rein like a whip and kicked his heels into its belly. That was a big mistake. The reaction was instantaneous. The stallion reared up on its hind legs and whinnied as it kicked out with its frontal hooves. Naruto screamed as he was nearly thrown back by the horse's suddenly action before he clung on the rein in a death grip as the horse plopped back on all fours again and galloped at a fast speed. Naruto had never been horseback riding before, and he was wishing he had. The chestnut stallion hooves trampled into the ground, its muscles bunching and contracting as it gained speed. Naruto, on the other hand, was shouting and screamed as he bounced on the horse's back dangerously, and clutched onto the rein like a lifeline. The blonde saw that they were approaching his family, and the samurai entourage at a dangerous pace. He yelped in surprise when his horse suddenly jumped over a log and sailed through the air. The horse regained its momentum after reconnecting with the ground and continued its speedy galloping. As they neared, Naruto only had time to yell a few words to warn them. "Help! Out of control horse! Move!" He butchered out as he continued to warble on the horse's back. But it was enough for his accompaniment to turn and look to see the lost prince get manhandled by a horse. The samurai panicked that they hadn't better guarded the prince, and by the speed he was going, it would be hard to stop his horse. "Naruto!" Akihiko screamed as he pulled his horse around to face the incoming child and stallion. "Pull the rein! Pull the rein to stop the horse!" Naruto nodded, and with a mighty heave he yanked the rein back. His stallion bellowed a complaintive neigh before slowly down and sliding to a complete stop into front of Akihiko and his stallion. Everyone sighed in relief, with Naruto's being the loudest. Ryu ordered that a samurai led Naruto's horse and they continued on their trek. His grandmother pulled her pure white horse next to his and ruffled the boy's hair. "Naruto, once we get home, I'm going to have to teach you horseback riding." Naruto nodded and let out another sigh. They walked over a small bridge over a large lake where an enormous temple resided. The temple was colored red with black tiling and was 2 stories high. It had 2 samurai districts at its side and cherry blossom trees that were planted on the other side of the bridge, along with a tall black gate that surrounded it with samurai guards positioned at the front. Once they saw them, they quickly opened the gate and bowed humbly as they came through. Naruto gaped as he took in the giant temple that towered over him. Harumi smiled as she looked at the temple as well. "Welcome home, Naruto," she beamed as she rode ahead of the boy. Naruto smiled. He liked the sound of that, and if possible, he smiled the biggest smile he had in years. "I'm home," was all Naruto said as he and his horse was led towards the temple. The lost heir of Whirlpool was finally home at last. Next time on the Lost Clan of Whirlpool, Central Guardians and Training. The past 3 days in Whirlpool country was a very unique and hectic one. The people of Whirlpool celebrated these 3 days of the return of their lost prince with giant festivals and festivities. During these days, Naruto Uzumaki was trying to get used to his giant home, which proved to be futile because the boy seemed to get himself lost every few seconds. so 2 guards always accompanied him whenever he decided to explore his new home. Naruto was currently walking through the corridors of the Uzumaki Temple, or informally known as the Uzumaki clan's home, with 2 samurai escorts, as he made his way towards the Uzumaki's royal council room. The blonde Jinchuriki was dressed in a comfy white kimono that was normally worn as relaxing wear, with a big blue maelstrom stitched in between his shoulder blades. "Here we are, Naruto-sama," one of his escorts announced as they halted in front of a thickly white tatame sliding door. Naruto only nodded before he thanked the samurai for escorting him to the room. "Our pleasure, Naruto-sama, it is the least we can do," the 2 said in unison before each grabbed a handle on a door, and sliding it open for the blonde so as to let him through. The young Uzumaki walked with as much regality and grace he could muster. The council room was a large room that had the Uzumaki insignia on them and a large wall of cement that made a huge arch in the middle of the room. This was the Whirlpool's council members' desks, as they had thrones of their very own. Right now, Naruto was standing up tall as he assessed the council members that were currently sitting in their chairs. He saw his grandfather, Ryu Uzumaki, sitting where was most likely the middle of the council and in the tallest and most intricately designed throne. He was wearing a plain sea-green kimono with his white haori still draped over his shoulders. His white hair was tied into a ponytail, and he stared down kindly at his grandson. His grandmother, Harumi Uzumaki, was seated to his right wearing a white kimono like Naruto did, and his uncle, Akihiko Uzumaki, was seated to Ryu's left wearing a long-sleeved black kimono held by a white obi sash and a white haori. Naruto stopped at a spot in the middle of the room before he bowed humble to his family and the other council members. "You asked for me, Grandpa?" Ryu smiled proudly at his grandson's act of maturity. For the past 3 days, he, Akihiko, and Harumi had been working on the boy's acts of mannerism and academics. His choices of words were slowly but surely exceeding to sound with more formality and elegance in his tone of voice. "Yes, Naruto-kun," Ryu said sternly as he stroked his beard, emitting an aura of authority from his figure. "As you may have noticed, I have summoned you before the council to discuss some things, yes?" The boy nodded, making Ryu smile with pride. "So if we have to talk," Naruto began before he tilted his spiky blonde head to the side, "then why is the council here with us? Isn't it supposed to be family-related or something?" "That's where you're wrong, my grandson," Harumi said, cutting into the conversation. "This council is no ordinary council. True, they along with us decide the fate of Uzumaki, but they are also the proud members and leaders of the Central Guardians Corporation." Naruto looked at her in confusion. "Central Guardians?" "That's right, Squirt," Akihiko said with a wide grin. "The Central Guardians are an elite group of samurai who tightens the security over all of Uzumaki. We strengthen our forces so we can be able to take the heat any hidden villages will throw at us." Naruto grinned excitedly at his uncle with his blue eyes shimmering with delight. "Awesome! So is one of you guys gonna be my sensei?" The adults chuckled at the boy's enthusiasm before Ryu spoke with a hearty smile. "Not one, but all, Naruto-kun," the daimyo said warmly. If possible, the blonde's eyes grew even bigger. "Cool. I kinda like the idea of having 6 different teachers, but why so many?" "Because Naruto-kun, you are the future leader of the Whirlpool Nation, and as being such you must take on the responsibilities to guide and protect the people of this land," Ryu explained kindly. "You must always remember and take this into heart, Naruto-kun. It isn't the people that serve us, but us as their leaders that serve them. And to be able to be a great leader with a kind heart and a strong fist, you will need to learn many different things, and we will help you to achieve them by our experiences and expertise. Do you accept?" Naruto stood up a little straighter after hearing his grandfather's inspirational words. He knew that this road will lead down a path that would be hard and difficult, but he was going to give it his all to protect his subjects and make his family proud. "I promise that I will do my best, grandfather, Databeo," Naruto exclaimed proud. Ryu's eyes smiled at his grandson's behavior and his unusual tick. "He's just like Kushina-chan in more ways than one," the old daimyo thought in amusement. "Excellent. Now as for what I will be teaching you is the art of sealing, or fuinjutsu. Your grandmother, Harumi, will be teaching you about politics and economics. Akihiko will be instructing you in kenjutsu and most importantly our clan's bloodline, the chakra chains technique." "What's a bloodline?" asked the boy curiously, though there was the ever-noticeable bubbly tone in his voice that gave away that he was very excited by the prospect of him having a bloodline. "Don't worry, kid, I'll teach you all there is to know about bloodlines when the time comes, Tebaru." Akihiko grinned and gave the boy a thumbs up. Ryu felt his sweat drop. Though Kushi-chan did get that horrible habit from Akihiko-kun, he sighed before he continued on with the meeting. "Now then, I believe we should let your new senseis introduce themselves and what they will be instructing you in. Why don't we begin with you, Masayoshi?" Ryu said, gesturing to the small man next to Akihiko. Naruto turned his head to look at the one called Masayoshi. He was shorter than all of the other men in the room with a lean and sleek build. His pale skin was as pretty as a girl's and his sea-green eyes were slightly droopy, but with a calm and serene look in them. He had strange, long, semi-spiky silver hair that was tied into a ponytail and stopped at mid-back. 2 long strands of his hair fell at the sides of his elfish face, accentuating his beauty. He wore a long-sleeved, dark blue yukata with light blue stripes with a black obi sash tethered around his waist. He also had on traditional wooden sandals, with a white haori draped on his shoulders. Masayoshi bowed respectfully towards the daimyo. Thank you very much for the opportunity, daimyo-sama. Ryo just waved him off lazily with a smile on his bearded face. Masayoshi turned his attention back to the curious blonde boy and gave him a small smile. Hello young Naruto, my name is Masayoshi Tanaka or Masa for short, and it is very nice to meet you at long last. Naruto brought a finger up to a whiskered cheek and scratched it with a sheepish grin on his face. He only ever did that whenever he was truly embarrassed. Thanks a bunch, Masayoshi-sensei. It's nice to meet you too, Tabeo. Masa chuckled heartily before he continued. I, like your grandfather and my best friend Akihiko, am a member of the Roku Kyoshi and I hold the coat for ninjutsu. I am also the captain for the Central Guardians assassination squads. If there is any known threat that is detected in Uzushigakure and cannot be resolved by peaceful means whatsoever, it is my squadron's and I's duty to eliminate that threat. Naruto gulped. For the duration of time that I have been given to train you, I will be instructing you in the art of ninjutsu and chakra control, which includes some of your family's ninjutsu styles that I have been graciously honored to be allowed to practice. I hope you are ready for this because I will not hold back on you. He said that with a smirk that Naruto found oddly terrifying. Naruto was about to ask him a question, but Masa cut him off with a raised hand. And before you ask, yes, I am a man? He answered with an annoyed edge in his voice. That statement alone caused some of the council members to chuckle with amusement, with Akihiko being the loudest. Naruto closed his mouth, and his attention was drawn to another man who coughed to get his attention. It was a man, and he seemed to be the youngest-looking one in the room. He had short black hair that was slicked back with gel and brown eyes. He had a peach color to his tan skin complexion, and had a skinny but lean, muscular body. He wore a yellow sleeveless shirt and blue pants, black sandals, a black karate belt, and blue-black wristbands. He also had on a white haori with the kanji for taijutsu etched on it. Yo, he said with a warm smile, name's Yusuke Urameshi and I hold the coat for taijutsu. I will be teaching you taijutsu, and which includes some of your family's styles, and I will also be in charge of your physical strength and stamina training. I hope you're ready to sweat because you're gonna do tons of it whether you like it or not. Naruto felt his nervousness spike and was afraid to know what the next person had to say. But it soon went away when he saw a very beautiful lady stand up after Yusuke and gave the boy a very heartwarming smile. She was the only other female in the room, besides his grandmother, and she gave off a motherly vibe despite her serious counterparts. She was a slender yet shapely woman with fair skin and brown eyes. She had waist-length purple hair with short bangs in a hime-cut style. She wore the traditional attire of a miko that consisted out of a purple hakama, a white haori with a purple sash-like belt, wooden sandals, and a white ribbon that partially held her hair in place. The kanji for genjutsu was printed on her white haori that came with her attire. Good morning, Lord Naruto, she said in a friendly tone. My name is Miya-sama and I am the captain of the spy and intelligence network of Uzushigakure. I am also the holder of the coat for genjutsu of the Roku Kyoshi. I will also be supervising your stealth and weapons training. I hope I can be able to teach you to the best of my abilities. With that, she gave him a respectful bow and sat back down. This time 2 members from the council stood up to address him this time. The man on the right was a tall, lean-built man with light skin and gray eyes. His hair was messy and light blonde, almost palish, with strands framing the sides of his face and hanging in between his eyes, and he had little chin stubble. He wore a brown coat, which sported a white diamond pattern along its bottom half, with a dark green shirt and pants underneath. He also had on wooden sandals, a striped dark green and white bucket hat that shadowed his eyes, and carried a wooden cane and a fan that was currently covering his face. His counterpart was a head shorter than him, and had his arms folded as he looked at the blonde Jinchuriki with a scowl. He was a fair-skinned man with long, silver hair like Masayoshi's, with 2 long strands framing his face and stopping at his collarbone. He had golden eyes, claws on his fingers, and strangely 2 dog ears perched atop of his head that twitched and swiveled occasionally, verifying its authenticity. He wore a large, baggy red robe that was tied together by a red sash, a giant purple beaded necklace, and a long katana blade with a purple hilt and sheathed in a black sheath. The man with the fan and the bucket had addressed him first. Why hello there young Master Naruto, it's nice to finally see the future leader that will be governing this great land one day. He suddenly had a playful smile that was stretched upon his lips as he fanned himself. My name is Kasuke Urahara, but you can just call me Urahara like everybody else. I don't do the sensei thing, it makes me sound old. And I'm only 34. He laughed heartily, making Naruto smile at his easygoing nature. He hoped this Urahara guy wouldn't be too hard on him when he trained him. Anyway, I am the head of the Research and Development Division of the Central Guardians and we hold the coats for senjutsu, my prince. Naruto stared at him quizzically. Isn't there supposed to be 1 coat for each member of the Roku Kyoshi? Kisuke smiled and suddenly clapped. My, what a sharp boy you are, Prince Naruto. And you are most certainly correct, but in this situation you are most certainly incorrect. Naruto blinked dumbly at him, and Kisuke began to explain. You see, while you are right that it is most commonly known that only 1 person can occupy 1 coat, there is also some leeway within that rule, and Inuyasha here and I are living proof of that leeway being formed. Inuyasha growled once Kisuke put an arm around his shoulders. How so? Kisuke closed his fan and tapped the end of it against his stubble-ridden chin. Well, the previous holder for Senjutsu was defeated by the both of us at the same time, thus making us both masters of Senjutsu. Naruto closed his eyes and nodded, pretending to see Kisuke's point even though he was completely clueless. Kisuke reopened his fan and resumed to fan himself. Ho ho ho! While you are with me and my no-fun partner, we will be teaching you history, science, literature, and philosophy, as well as anything else that comes to us at that time. Inuyasha just acknowledged him with a nod before he spoke. As this idiot said before, my name is Inuyasha. I am the captain of the Hunter and Tracking Division of the Central Guardians. If someone has committed a crime of any sort, it's my team's job to hunt them down and drag them here so they can be severely punished. Naruto gulped loudly at that part. As stated, I am also a holder of the Senjutsu coat and I will be helping. He quoted that part with his 2 fingers on each hand. Urahara teach you history, science, literature, and philosophy. Then he sat down without another word with Kisuke following suit. Naruto had mixed feelings about his teachers, but he would do his best to make his family and his new homeland proud of him. Ryu smiled and clapped his hands together. Excellent. Now that introductions are out of the way, we can begin your training early tomorrow morning, Naruto-kun. Any objections? Ryu looked around council for any signs of disagreement. When he found none, he pulled out the gavel he had in his sleeve and banged it once on his desk to dismiss the current meeting. Alright then, Naruto-kun, you may have the rest of the day to yourself, my boy. Naruto grinned at his grandfather before giving him a respectful bow and scurrying out of the room, leaving the adults to continue to discuss over the blonde's training. Back in the village hidden in the leaves, word of Naruto's true heritage and his leaving was received with mixed feelings among the populace of Konoha. Of course, the civilian population was in complete denial and refused to acknowledge that the demon was the son of the 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze. The shinobi population, at least those from established clans, accepted the news as the truth and was furious that it had been kept under wraps from them. And while most ninja had not been openly hostile to the boy, they still didn't do anything to help him. Now they realized that they had been letting the villagers get away naming the son of the 4th, and it sickened them to no end. Once the main elders of the Hyuga clan got wind of the arranged marriage proposal between the Uzumaki and the Hyuga, they were absolutely furious that Hayashi would willingly surrender the Byakugan to another clan without their consent. Despairingly for them, no matter how much they lamented against the prospect of the arranged marriage, they could not stop the coronation without starting a blood feud with the Uzumaki, and the fact that Hinata Hyuga was the most important person in the Hyuga clan, nay the entire village, was something that infuriated the main house members, for she was far out of their manipulative reach. On a better related note, Hitomi and Hayashi couldn't be any happier with the success of their results. Knowing that Hinata would be safe from the fateful caged bird sealing by Naruto's heritage, the couple now had no fear that their future child would be safe from harm as well. While the majority of the villagers couldn't deem the truth, what they all did know was what an important role that the Hyuga held of stopping a horrible war that could have happened with Yuzushiogakure. All of the adults now treated Hinata with even greater respect they had previously held with her whenever she went out in public. What they did not know was that Hinata was completely unaware of the marriage, and often gave them confused looks whenever they were being extremely nicer to her than they were before. Bunch of suck-ups. Her parents honored their decision they had established with the Uzumaki, and would wait until the little Bluinette attended the Konoha Academy before they told her. Speaking of the cute little mouse, she was currently sitting on her knees in a respectful manner, waiting for her father to arrive to start her training sessions. She was very surprised when she saw her mother walk in with him. They two adults saw their daughter decked out in her usual training garb, a black shirt with a fishnet over shirt and black pants, sitting patiently and respectfully on her knees waiting to begin her lessons. She gave them a respectfully humble bow that put a smile on their faces before they too sat on their knees in front of her. "Ohio Okasan, Ootusan." Hinata greeted shyly with a small blush dusted on her pale cheeks. Hitomi smiled warmly at her child. "Ohio dear." She greeted back. "Ohio Hinata-chan." Hayashi said in a much more firm tone than his wife. "Hinata," Hayashi said in a businesslike voice. Hinata knew that when her father spoke like that, it meant that he was serious, and she should listen attentively. "As you know, you will be starting the Konoha Shinobi Academy in 2 years' time, yes?" She nodded. "Well, because of recent developments, your mother will be taking over your training when I am unable to. You are of very great importance to the clan and the village, Hinata, and I am sure you have been aware of how the villagers are treating you much differently than they had before. I would like to reveal to you why, but that answer will have to wait on your 8th birthday, my dear." Hayashi suddenly took Hinata's small hands in his own before he gave her a rare smile. "My daughter, I want you to always keep in mind that you are our daughter first, and nothing will ever change that." "Your father is absolutely correct, my little Usagi-chan," Hitomi crooned as she placed her hands over her husband's. A/N. Usagi means rabbit in Japanese. "Some people may treat you a bit more differently than others, but we will always treat you as our daughter, and we will always love and be proud of you no matter what the circumstances, okay?" Hinata didn't understand what exactly was perspiring at the moment, but she was fairly happy that her parents would stick by her side through thick and thin, especially her father, who rarely ever showed much emotion in her presence before. Hi. Arigato for believing in me, Okasan, Ootusan. Hinata smiled shyly at her parents, who in turn smiled warmly back at her. high as she cleared his throat to regain his composure, and gently removed his hands from under his wife's. Now that this matter is settled, let us begin your training, Hinata-chan. Hinata, surging with newfound confidence, nodded before sheer determination lit ablaze in her pale, pupilless, and lavender-tinted eyes. Hi-O-Tusin. The next day rolled over in the land of whirlpools, and the sun peeked brightly over the horizon, setting the sky with warm hues of red, orange, and yellow. A/N. Ironic, isn't it? The villagers of Uzumaki slowly got out of their beds and began to leisurely walk among others in the palace square, the markets open, an area bustling with noises of every kind. At the Uzumaki temple in a room high on the second floor, Naruto was currently snoring loudly, and lying haphazardly with his limbs every which way and his covers at his feet. Naruto had a suite all to himself, decked out with a king-sized futon mattress that was stationed against the wall, a gaudy bathroom with a tub fit for two and its own sauna, a living room next to his bedroom or his tea room, as his grandmother likes to call it, an extravagant walk-in closet, and a large terrace outside with a high enough view to look over Uzumaki. His old-fashioned, but beautifully handcrafted gold with ember-twined wind-up alarm clock was the only other sound besides Naruto's excessive snoring. After a minute, with the little hand on 7 and the big hand on 12, the clock went off with an ear-splitting ring. Naruto's snot bubble that inflated and deflated along with his loud breathing suddenly popped as the alarm sounded. The boy slowly opened his big cerulean eyes before he yawned sleepily. He shifted his head over to the alarm clock and gave it an irritated look before he banged the top of it with his fist, instantly silencing it. Stupid thing, he grumbled before he rose up in a sluggish manner. A giant portrait of a man with spiky red hair with 2 horns and purple eyes with rings loomed behind him, pinned over his giant futon. Naruto was told by his grandfather, Ryo, that man was the father of all shinobi, the Rikudo Sennin. He held great importance in the Uzumaki clan, for they were his descendants along with the Uchiha and the Senju clans. Almost every room in the temple had a picture of the greatest man to ever live. Naruto got out of bed and slipped his feet into his foxy slippers that were lying in wait beside his futon. He was wearing a baggy sky blue shirt and pants complete with his favorite walrus cap that was covering his unruly blonde head. The others usually wore kimonos to bed, but Naruto found them uncomfortable, so he wore nighties instead. The young Uzumaki started out his daily routine at his new home, using the bathroom, shower, brush teeth, put on clothes, sit in the tea room and have some tea and breakfast while watching television, and finally go explore the temple. But today was a little different. Today was the starting of his samurai and ninja training. 2 samurai escorts led the way to one of the temple's private training dojos. Their names were Sho and Arata, Naruto's personal guards. They often escorted Naruto around and were genuinely nice to him. They even played some of the boys' wacky games that they had found amusing. Sho and Arata were fairly the same height, and wore the standard black body armor that all samurai were required to wear. Sho had hazel eyes with glossy straight black hair that was parted at the middle. Arata had strange amber eyes, like a feline's, and curly light brown hair. Once they reached the dojo, Sho and Arata bowed and waved goodbye to Naruto before parting their separate ways. Naruto took a deep breath and slid open the dual sliding doors and expected to see Yusuke there for his physical conditioning, but he was surprised when he found his grandfather instead. Grandpa? Naruto questioned, a little confused as he made his way inside the dojo. What are you doing here? Where's Yusuke-sensei? He's supposed to be teaching me in physical conditioning today. Ryu gave his grandson a warm smile. Oh, don't worry, Naruto-kun. Yusuke-sen will be here soon, but before he comes, I am going to give you something that every Uzumaki receives once they begin their training to become great warriors of Uzumaki. Naruto's blue eyes lit up with excitement. Yada! Is it a katana? A scroll full of Uzumaki clan jutsus? What is it? What is it? Ryo laughed heartily and walked up to his grandson and ruffled his already messy blonde hair. Ma Naruto-kun, it's nothing really exciting, but it is very essential for your training. Especially your physical training. Naruto pouted at the prospect of not getting a katana nor learning any jutsu at all. His uncle already had a sweet blade, so why couldn't he? He puffed out his cheeks in annoyance as he gave his grandfather a slightly irritated gaze. Well, if it's not a katana or jutsu, then what is it? Gravity seals? Ryo said simply. Naruto tilted his head in question. Gravity seals? Ryo nodded. Hi, Naruto-kun. But not just any gravity seals. These seals are only used by those of Uzumaki blood. Cool. So what do they do, Grandpa? Well, Ryo began as he pulled back a sleeve and showed his bare arm. He applied little chakra to the limb, and several black markings began to slither up his tanned arm and glow brightly. These seals act much like weights in a way that they add resistance to strengthen your body. But in a way unlike weights, they only add pressure to certain parts of your body. You never need to replace them like normal weights, and you can add the resistance to whatever length you desire. Naruto's lips curled into a satisfying grin. Awesome. May I have gravity seals too, Grandpa? Nah. Ryu gave a hearty laughter. Of course, my boy. Let's get started right away, shall we? Naruto nodded vigorously and Ryu began to quickly go through some seals before his tan hands lit up in a bluish glow. Now, Naruto-kun, in order for this to work, I need you to bare your chest for me. And my chest? The lad stammered as he held on tightly to his plain blue training kimono. Ryu gave a small reassuring smile at his grandson's discomfort. Hi. Gravity seals are etched onto the body, right? The boy nodded. Well, in order for them to work, a seal master, like me, needs to apply them to the body for the seals to be effective for your training. Naruto blinked before the realization slowly sunk in. Oh. I get it. I get it. He quickly stripped off his robe, leaving his torso exposed. Okay, Grandpa, I'm ready for the gravity seals. Several hours later, Naruto was exiting the dojo in a very sluggish manner with his grandfather and Yusuke Urameshi in a tow. Ryo huffed in amusement at the blonde Uzumaki struggling. As yes, he remembered the day when he first received his gravity seals. That was a very tiresome day for him indeed. Don't worry, Naruto-kun, Ryo assured as he folded his arms behind his back. It will take a few days for your body to adjust to the seals, but it will be well worth it once you see and experience the results. Till then though, it looks like we'll have to postpone your taijutsu training until you get the hang of the seal's resistance. Yusuke said as an afterthought. Geez, and I was so looking forward to running you into the ground. Ah well, maybe another time. He's joking, right? Naruto thought as he sweated nervously. Yusuke took no notice of Naruto's anxiety and slapped the boy on his back hard as he suddenly laughed out loud without warning. Well then. I'll see you later, Prince Naruto, Ryosama. I've got to get back to training the young samurai to bees. It's about time for my shift anyway. Ja-ni. And with that, the exuberant young man went on his way as he whistled a merry tune. Probably thinking of ways to torture the other boys, Naruto thought. Ryo seemed thoroughly amused by the man's attitude as he led the stumbling young Uzumaki down the hallway to their next destination. Think nothing of Yusuke's teasing Naruto-kun, the elder mused. It's just his way of having fun. Come now, we must meet up with Arumi-chan so we can go over calligraphy, politics, and economics with you. The boy grumbled in protest but followed his grandfather nonetheless, albeit wobbly. Approximately 3 months had passed since Naruto's most anticipated arrival in the land of the Whirlpools, and his family couldn't be more proud of him. The small boy seemed to breathe fresh life into the dreary and vastly empty temple that was the Uzumaki clan's home. His exuberant and happy personality made even the angriest crack smile at the boy's happy-go-lucky attitude. He was a kind and hard-working young soul that put seamless bounds of energy into anything and everything he ever did, and was always grateful for anything he had ever received, being a child that started out with little to nothing. However, happy and cheerful times couldn't seem to reach the village hidden in the leaves, for they were in deep trouble for their past acts and transgressions they had inflicted on the spirited young prince. The fire daimyo was keeping a tighter rein over them and was keeping an open eye on their progression as a village whole. Back in Uzushio-gakure, news of reopening trade with the hidden leaf had spread like wildfire over the land and was, as expected, received with mixed feelings among the people. It only served to rile them up even more once they heard of the ludicrous and vulgar treatments the leaf had treated their prized prince. Of course they voiced their complaints among the masses, but the Uzumaki clan reassured their complaints with reason and rationality. It quenched the people's thirst for justice, if only a little bit. As of right now, we turn to our main attention to the blonde prince, whom was running at a breakneck speed, his body tense before he disappeared in the yellow haze just before a pair of shuriken could embed themselves into his back. He resumed his running with a nervous sweat beating down his forehead. You know you don't have to try to kill me for real, Mia-sensei. That training until you drop expression is only a figure of speech, you know, he yelled over his shoulder, his blue eyes widening before he ducked to avoid a barrage of sabans sailing over his head. They embedded themselves on the door ahead of him, and the blonde quickly took the chance to turn down a dark corridor to avoid another attack. Ryo was busy enjoying some jasmine tea when he heard his grandson's cries of indignation echo loudly through the hallways. He chuckled before standing up onto his feet and sliding the door open to peer outside. Sure enough, he saw Mia wearing a small smile as she threw saban and shuriken at Naruto, who was busy dodging them with odd poses. Looks like it is a Tuesday after all, the old, white-haired man mused in his thoughts before he slid the door closed, sat back onto his knees, and resumed his drinking of his tea. Oh, Naruto was busy grooming a few horses with his grandmother, Harumi Uzumaki, in the Uzumaki clan's royal stables. He was grumbling as he brushed the matted fur of the horses, and they neighed in appreciation, but he just crinkled his nose at the disgusting smell the stalls permeating into the air. He had just come from Masayoshi's ninjutsu training and Urahara's and Inuyasha's history studies. Masayoshi had gotten him to practice of his chakra control, only to find out that his control was very much lacking and very unstable. So in order to regulate it, the warrior assigned the boy to do basic chakra control exercises like the leaf exercise. Masayoshi said that he had a lot of work ahead of him for him to be able to even do one jutsu, but then he reassured that with a steady and ample pace of learning that he would have the exercises by the next 2 weeks or so. Those words alone seemed to lift the blonde out of his depressed stupor. With Urahara and Inuyasha, Naruto had to learn about all of Uzushio-gakure's history. At first, the boy complained about the idea and was adamantly bored, but then he slowly started to pay attention when past leaders, family members, and battles were put into the fray of explanations that seemed to grasp the easily distracted boy's attention. He asked many questions and read along with the ample pace Urahara set up for him, which impressed the man very much. Inuyasha, of course, paid little to no attention to them but would occasionally peek one eye open at the fascinated child before closing it again to fall into a deep sleep. Those 2 lessons ultimately led to the present situation when Harumi called over the boy when he was just finishing up history class. The boy was drinking his favorite tea, ginger infused with honey and hibiscus flowers, along with his favorite snack, miso ramen. He was happily eating in his tea room as he watched television when his grandmother suddenly burst into his room and demanded him to come with her. So he complied without a word, for he knew that she could get upset and scary within the minute if something didn't go the woman's way. Hence the Uzumaki clan's notorious temperament issues. Anyway, Harumi had brought him into the stables, where she then went into a long story about how the Uzumaki had used horses for battle and as companions for many generations. The small child zoned in and out from time to time, only to be pulled out every so few minutes from his grandmother screaming her head off at him about his insolence. And after the long explanation, they both ended up grooming the large creatures and taking care of their needs. Of course, this didn't sit too well with the young prince. "Oh, grandmother, why do I have to do this? These stalls are really stinky and the horse's fur has so much fur that they keep reknitting themselves," the boy whined as he rubbed his sore arms for effect. Harumi looked up from her horse, which was a tall, big, and strong white mare with black socks and a red ribbon tied to its tail. "Naruto-kun, a little bit of hard work never hurts anybody, and you plan to have your own horse as well, yes?" The small boy nodded vigorously. "Well then," the woman grinned, "in order for you to have a horse of your own, you must first learn how to take care of it. So by practicing on the other horses, you will have experience for the basic care of your horse." The blonde child still didn't look convinced. "If I'm going to learn this stuff, then why don't I have my own horse to practice on? I mean, these are other people's stallions and maras, so why don't they do it on theirs and I practice on mine when I get one?" Harumi smirked. Eager to get started, eh? Very well, I'll play this game." With a snap of her fingers, the 2 samurai escorts that were guarding them quickly left the stalls for a few moments, which thoroughly confused young Naruto. Then his cerulean eyes widened once he saw they walk in along with a young fowl. It had a strange orange pelt with a short, white mane and tail with red socks along its calf. It whinnied and neighed in protest, kicking out its hind legs at the samurai whom were keeping the young creature at bay. The elderly queen grinned at her grandson's awestruck expression before she cleared her throat to grab his attention once more. "You wanted a horse, so I'm giving you a horse." She then gestured towards the fowl. "Meet your new companion, Naruto-kun. It is a male and is now and forevermore yours, and have the pleasure of naming it." The boy nodded before turning his eyes back towards the creature. He walked up towards the bucking young horse until he was standing but 2 feet away from it. The fowl noticed his presence, and fixated its big, black eyes towards the bright prince. It stopped its struggling to blow out a breath from its nostrils before cocking its head to the side to look at Naruto with curiosity. The young Uzumaki did the same. He grinned before he went up to the creature and started to pet its head and neck in a sign of great affection. The fowl neighed happily, licking the boy's cheek, making him laugh in response. "I know the perfect name for him. Akira, bright and clear, Tabeo." Naruto smiled hugely at his grandmother. Harumi smiled as she ruffled up the boy's spiky blonde head. "I think that it is a wonderful name, Naruto-kun. Now let's finish up here so you can get back to kenjutsu training with your uncle Akihiko, any? Next time on the Lost Clan of Whirlpool, the 4 years and a half, heartbreak, and departure." Naruto's knees wobbled before he collapsed onto the dojo's tatami-matted floor with a heavy thud. 4 years had passed ever since he had come to Yuzushiobikure, making him approximately 8 years old, and they have been the best years of the boy's life so far. He had a family who loved him to death, and teachers who only wanted him to do the best he could in his training. And as of right now, he had just finished a heated spar session with his taijutsu instructor, Yusuke Urameshi, and had just been beaten soundly, though he had lasted much longer than last time. He panted harshly as he looked up at the ceiling with dazed eyes, and a wide, lopsided grin slapped happily across his face. Even though he had lost, he was happy that he had progressed exceedingly than what was expected from his teachers. "All right," Yusuke said as he popped his joints back into place. "That's enough sparring for today. Go ahead and start on your meditation training. I'll catch up with you in a little bit, MK? "Yes, sir." Naruto saluted before limping off to the meditation room. It was only a 5-minute walk from the dojo to the meditation room, but it felt like an hour for the boy due to his intense sparring sessions with one of his toughest sensei. After a few minutes of painful hobbling, the blonde finally made it to his destination and signaled the 2 guards by the giant double doors to open it with a nod. The mediation room was by far the biggest and most spacious room in the Uzumaki temple. It could be able to hold at least 300 people and still have enough walking room for each individual. It had beautifully pristine black titanium double doors with white kanji letters for serenity imprinted boldly across them. And once opened, Naruto was greeted by a dimly lit room from the feeble flickering glow of a few candlelight. He walked inside with the regality of the strongest samurai, with a mindset that was as calm and cool as a summer's breeze, despite his crippling pain from his heated sparring session with his sensei. As he walked, candles lit up once he passed, furthering illuminating the dark room. But the strangest thing about these candles was that they were floating in midair. This was because of the Uzumaki designing specialized seals that allowed an object to float at a certain height in the air. They used this idea in this particular room to further enhance serenity, tranquility, and calm when one entered the meditation room. The candlelight pathway ended once he stopped at the center of the room. There, waiting for him, was a large seal that was surrounded by other complex seals and glowed faintly upon the young prince's arrival. Its glow pulsed like a heartbeat, giving it an eerie sight, and suddenly stopped when Naruto stood in the center of it. The boy sat down in the standard lotus position, his plain blue battle kimono he had donned on illuminated by the seal's soft glow. Well, since I'm gonna be stuck in here for a while, I might as well go see that grouch of a fox, Naruto grumbled, as he recalled the first time he had met his tenant. Flashback, Hajime. It was early February in the land of Edi, or more commonly known as the land of whirlpools, and a young blonde boy by the name of Naruto Uzumaki was walking with his grandfather, Ryo Uzumaki, to a new training room in the Uzumaki temple. So what am I gonna learn in this new dojo, Gigi? 1. Naruto questioned excitedly as his walk steadily turned into hyperactive bouncing. Is it gonna be some cool room with no gravity? Or a room where you can never get tired? Or a room where there are really cool weapons that you're gonna train me in? Ryo laughed heartily at his grandson's hyperactive attitude. Truly the boy was a breath of fresh air in this old rundown temple that used to be filled with the greatest people to ever walk this earth. Ryo felt as if he could still see all of his deceased relatives through this one boy, all smiling with happiness. Or maybe it was just him getting old. Mama Naruto-kun, the old daimyo chided as he began to ruffle the blonde's spiky hair. I'll explain what this new room is in just a moment. First we have to get there, okay? Okay. The whiskered child grinned and took his grandfather's hand with his own and began to walk merrily by his side towards their destination. A few minutes late, the two Uzumakis arrived in front of two gigantic titanium-plated doors. Two samurai were currently standing guard in front of these two doors and gave the two royals a respectful bow once they stopped in front of them. Naruto's cerulean eyes went wide at the gargantuan doors that had the white kanji lettering that spelled serenity across them. He had seen some pretty big things in his life, but he had never quite seen two giant doors in his life. This, Naruto-kun, Ryo began, gaining the small child's attention, is the meditation room. The young prince tilted his head to the side in confusion. The meditation room? Ryo nodded. Hi, the meditation room is specifically designed to let one enter one's mind to gain a sort of peace and balance of oneself. The old geezer suddenly looked down at him with a stern look. Naruto knew that whenever his grandfather donned this expression on his face, he was serious, and that the boy should always take his word to heart. Do you remember the little talk that Yorabukin, 2, Ajisen, 3, and I had about the Kyubi no Yoko, nine-tailed fox, residing in your stomachi? The boy nodded and unconsciously gripped his stomachi as he recalled that day. His relatives had all called him into the royal counseling room to discuss something of the utmost importance with him, and only him. Even the Rokukyoshi weren't allowed to participate in this discussion, besides his uncle Akihiko, of course. They had first asked him if he truly wanted to know about what they were going to explain to him, for it was something that they deemed that would change his life forever. And being the naturally oblivious idiot we all know and love, he eagerly agreed, taking no heed to the terseness of the situation. After they did explain that he was the third Jinchuriki of the Kyubi no Yoko, did he truly grasp what they meant by his life changing? He sat and stared at them in shock and disbelief, not uttering a word with his relatives for a full 15 minutes. When he finally did speak, he asked them, in a quite hoarse voice, if they were joking. They were not. So for a full 5 weeks after the explanation, Naruto has been adamantly combating against himself of the pros and cons of having a biju, tailed beast, sealed inside of him. He was surprisingly accepting of the horrifying fact, for he knew that before he arrived in the land of Edi, the villages of Konohagakure has treated him horridly for most of his young life. So knowing of the reason why they hated him so, he couldn't really blame them. He also couldn't blame his parents, Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki, for sealing the beast inside of him either. He knew that what they did was right and was for the good of the village, and that only an Uzumaki could contain a powerful beast such as the Kyubi. After finding this out, the young boy couldn't help but respect and love his late parents even more for their honorable and sensible sacrifice. Naruto's cerulean eyes turned somber for a moment before he finally answered his grandfather after a long bout of silence. Yeah, I remember, the boy sighed. Ryo gave the tormented boy a sympathizing gaze before giving him a reassuring squeeze on his shoulder. Well, the meditation room is specially designed to enter one's mindscape to rid of all impurities and face one's greatest fears and weaknesses. The old daimyo suddenly affronted a serious look on his face as he turned his grandson towards him to look straight into his wrinkly eyes. Naruto, this room will help you face against the Kyubi. The young prince's blue eyes widened in shock at his grandfather's words. He wriggled himself free from Ryo's grip and took a step back in fear. Face the Kyubi? He stammered. Gigi, are you crazy? That was the beast that almost stomped Konoha to the ground. And you want me to face it in battle? Naruto suddenly clasped his hands together against his chest as if it was a life support, while he shook. I mean, I just started my training and I'm not strong enough to. Naruto-kun, Ryo interrupted, waving his hands in dismissal. I never said that you had to fight the beast. You will have to do that when you are ready. Really? The blonde Uzumaki sniffled and looked up at the daimyo of the land of Edi. I don't. Ryo smiled down at the boy lovingly. Of course not, my boy. I just wanted you to enter your mindscape to converse with the beast. This will be one of your greatest trials that you will ever face, even greater than all of your sensei's training. The old man suddenly kneeled in front of the boy, fixating him a look of concern. Now, are you ready to face the Kyubi? We do not have to do this if you are not ready. Naruto dawned on a hard look of immense concentration. What would happen if he did see the nine-tailed fox? Would it attack him or try to attack him? Would it be friendly? Would it tell him why it attacked Konohagakure and ended the lives of his parents that night? All of these questions buzzed around the young blonde's head, filling him with much curiosity than fear. He was about to give the old warrior his answer when he suddenly remembered what Akihiko once told him. Naruto, with his resolve steeled, looked at his grandfather with unwavering determination that made the old man smile with pride. I'm ready, Gigi. It's like what Akihiko Ajisen told me, a good samurai will always have his doubts, but a better one will always face them with true heart and bravery. If possible, Ryo's smile grew. Very good, my child. I will have to thank Akihiko after this battle with your inner demon is put to rest. Now then, are you ready, Naruto-kun? Naruto grinned widely at Ryo with excitement dancing in his cerulean eyes. Hi, Gigi. Ryo chuckled heartily before grasping the boy's hand once again in his as he led him into eerily black room. All right then, and do not worry, my grandchild. I will be with you every step of the way. Naruto watched with morbid fascination as floating candles were set alight whenever he and his grandfather walked past. He saw other samurai meditating in glowing seals, barely moving in their deep mental battles with themselves. Naruto suddenly bumped into his grandfather after the man had stopped and was about to ask why but stopped after he saw his Ryo's narrowed gaze. The young Uzumaki followed his gaze and gasped at the sight. There, in the middle of the vastly dark room, was a large glowing seal surrounded by other tiny seals and would pulse after every few seconds. This, Ryo suddenly spoke, gaining Naruto's attention, is a specialized seal that our clan created specifically for us Uzumaki to enter our mindscapes. At this, Naruto raised a blonde brow in confusion. Why just us? Why not for other samurai too? He asked, tilting his spiky blonde head in question. Ryo smiled inwardly at the child's intuitiveness, but he held a feigned look of question nevertheless. He stroked his beard as he pretended to think long and hard about the boy's question, which didn't go unnoticed by the wisp child as he began to fidget around in anticipation and annoyance. Ryo stopped stroking his beard and finally spoke. Well, Naruto-kun, we Uzumaki have large quantities of chakra, yes? The boy nodded. Well, we need to have specialized seals to enter our mindscapes for that reason. Any normal seals would instantly shatter for they are not well designed enough to contain our heavy quantities of chakra. Thusly bringing us to the seal here. He finished before pointing to the giant pulsating seal. Oh, Naruto drawled out in realization. Ryo chuckled. It's okay, Naruto-kun. Your question was a very good one, and it is good to ask people about things that you do not know of. It shows that you are progressing as a person. Now, the old man's tone changed to a serious one, making the prince stand up taller as he fixating his grandfather a look of a disciplined samurai. Are you ready to converse with the QB, Naruto-kun? Said boy nodded vigorously. Hi. Ryo returned his nod with another. HN. Okay, now, proceed towards the seal's middle, but do it slowly so it can get used to another Uzumaki user. Too fast and it could trigger the seal's system defenses, and you don't want that. Naruto gulped audibly and slowly approached the pulsating seal. Its soft glow that it previously gave off was now brightening and its pulse increasing. With great care, the Jinchuriki shuffled a small foot into the rims of the seal before doing the same to the other. With each step that he took, the seal seemed to scan him, getting used to his presence. After 10 minutes of slowly shuffling and scanning, Naruto finally made it to the center of the seal. Good job, Naruto-kun. Ryo yelled, congratulating the boy. The reason for the leader's yelling was because Naruto was 15 yards away from the man. Now the next step is to sit cross-legged at the seal's complex center. Naruto nodded before hesitantly sitting down, making sure that he was positioned perfectly in the seal's center. After doing so, he cupped his hands to his mouth before yelling back at Ryo. Now what? Now you must clasp your hands out in front of you, close your eyes, and push out all of the sounds and reality, as we know it from your mind. That is the key of entering your mindscape. If anything goes wrong I will pull you out with our Uzumaki Biratare Nato, Chakra Chenta Kaniku, Uzumaki Bloodline Art, Chakra Chains Technique. Gotcha! Naruto called. He sucked in a deep breath to calm his nerves before he slapped his hands together in a prayer style. He regulated his breathing, emptying all of his thoughts as he started to plunge himself into darkness. He only heard one thing before he entered his mindscape. Good luck, Naruto-kun. Hello? Naruto called as he trudged along in the dirty water. After he had closed his eyes, he had found himself lying awake in some dirty sewer water. He continued to wander aimlessly, taking in his state of mind. It looked like the inner workings of a sewer, dirty water licking at his blue sandals as he continued to trek along. His nose crinkled as he took a whiff. Yep, even the nasty smell was correct. Man, this is what the inside of my mind looks like. Naruto muttered aloud to no one in particular. It sure is crummier than I thought it would be. I mean, sure the villagers back in Konoha hated my guts, but I finally found my family so it should be a little bit better in her. Gah! He suddenly tripped and planted face first against the cold hard wooden floor. Wait, wooden? Floor? Naruto groaned and began to rub his head to soothe his throbbing pain. He looked down at what tripped him and realized that he was currently lying on neatly polished hardwood floors. He pushed himself up onto his feet once more before blinking in surprise. What the? The Jinchuriki had found himself standing at the starting point of an endless hallway. But it didn't look like sewers, no, instead it looked like the traditional tatami-decorated hallways that were held in the Uzumaki temple. Naruto cautiously proceeded forward, staring questionably at the many doors that would lead into unknown rooms that his mindscape possessed. Feeling curious, Naruto slid open a door and peered inside. What he saw was a delightful surprise. He saw another him eating all of the known ramen in the world. He laughed before reclosing the door with a grin on his face. All of a sudden a faint glow came from the top of the door, causing the boy to stare at it with rapt attention. He watched as a blank white plate fizzle into existence before kanji letters began to burn itself onto it as it spelled words. Ramen dreams, the blonde said as he read the molten words. He was about to go look into another room but stopped once he heard a voice call out to him. Naruto, Naruto, come to me, Naruto, it said eerily with its heavy, almost demonic voice resonating throughout the boy's mindscape. Knowing what or who that was, the young prince gulped before he followed the sounds of the voice to find the source. The blonde gulped as he stopped his aimlessly hunt as he stood in front of a lone door. It was decaying dark oak castle chamber double doors that was heavily chained and sealed, warning people to stray away. He saw a banged-up plague that had Kyubi no Yoko written in blood. Naruto sighed in exasperation. Oh, how delightful, he muttered, couldn't it have a nice-looking door with ramen designs on it? He took in a deep breath before he began to slowly walk towards the death-ridden door. The seals immediately disintegrated as soon as his hand fell upon it, and in a show of speed the chains immediately retracted themselves from the door and disappeared in a plume of smoke. The doors seemed to breathe once the seals and chains were undone, and Naruto saw bubbling red chakra leak out of the door and slowly inch its way towards him. He took in a deep breath before he pushed the doors open and stepped inside and stared defiantly at the thing that had caused him misery for most of his short life. The nine-tailed fox. It was big, bigger than anything the boy has ever seen, and was locked behind a red gate with a large 8-tetragram seal plastered in the middle of it, but it did nothing to belittle the beast's size. It was roughly 100 meters high, taller than a 30-story building, with its 9 tails swishing violently behind it amongst the boy's arrival. Its teeth were 5 times longer and thicker than the boy, its eyes were blood red and filled with malice. Its fur was the color of crimson, as if it was painted with the blood of its adversaries. It chuckled at Naruto's defiant look, making the large dojo-styled room reverberate from the vibrations. At long last, my container comes to see me, the Kyubi said, grinning maliciously, making the blonde shiver in fear. Though you are much punier than I imagined and much weaker as well. Naruto narrowed his eyes angrily at the Biju for. Its voice sounded heavily male, but that thought was, for now, pushed to the farthest resources of his mind. Naruto pointed an accusing finger at the fox. I'm not puny. I just haven't hit my growth spurt yet, and I'm not weak either. I have 6 senseis training me to become the greatest daimyo I can be of Yuzushiogakure. The Kyubi's eyes widened momentarily at this. And besides, you aren't some chip off of the old block either, Buster. You don't quite live up to my expectations, just as I don't live up to yours. The Kyubi growled with its tails swishing much more rapidly than before. What do you mean that I don't meet your expectations, human? I am the strongest of all the Biju combined. How do I not meet your standards? He roared. The blonde just closed his eyes in his infamous expression, stuck out his bottom lip, and began to scratch at the back of his spiky blonde head. Well, I thought you were gonna be way bigger than you are now. I mean, don't get me wrong or anything, you are huge, but just not the huge that I was expecting. He sighed. And it's just well disappointing to know, you know? What an impudent little twit this boy was, calling the Kyubi insignificant. The beast growled at his jailer, his hatred riling up much more than it had decades ago. His gargantuan claws immediately unsheathed themselves and stuck through the gate, desperately trying to reach the boy so they could tear him limb for limb. Sadly, the young blonde was just a few feet out of reach. The Kyubi roared in frustration as he began to claw furiously at the cage to let him kill the boy. Come here, you little brat. I'll rip you apart and crunch on your bones even if it wouldn't satisfy me for a snack. The beast hissed, now adding his tails to the gate to try and pry it apart, but to no avail. Naruto was a little unnerved by the enormity of the Biju's claws, but quickly got over it once he saw the fox having a little temper tantrum. Man, what a grouch, the boy mumbled under his breath before whistling to gain the fox's attention. Okay, listen. You don't like me, and I really don't like you, but we're stuck together anyway and should help each other out in the long run. The 9-tailed beast snorted. And why should a great being such as me stoop to a low to help an impudent puny human such as you? The boy felt a tick form on his forehead, but he ignored it, for now. Because if I die, you die? The blonde smirked triumphantly at the fox's frustration. And I can change the landscape of my mind that Ryujiji taught me. It was true. Before Naruto even knew about his mindscape, Ryo has been teaching him the art of meditation, and on one day, Ryo told him that with a little application of his imagination to his mind, he could be able to shape it into any form that he wanted. But of course the blonde didn't know what the ginger meant by that at the time. Naruto squeezed his eyes shut as he pictured his desired landscape of his mindscape. The Kyubi's eyes widened in surprise as he felt the ground rumbled and waver underneath him before the hard wooden floor began to morph into grassy plains. The rotted ceiling was replaced with a bright baby blue sky. The leaky walls stretched far and wide before they disappeared, only to be replaced with more grassy plains that stretched far away from the duo. and the gate that held the QB in place and seemed to stretch up into the heavens began to glow before it shrunk and attached itself around the fox's neck, forming a makeshift collar. As the young Jinchuriki concentrated, woodland creatures began to fizzle into existence, scurrying about upon the grassy plains. The gargantuan fox yelped in surprise as trees began to sprout under his paws and quickly jumped away as soon grew as tall as him to provide home and refuge and shade for all of the animals. Lakes and rivers fell from the never-ending sky and made themselves known by establishing themselves into grooves that the grassy plains provided. Naruto slowly opened his eyes and felt an enormous wave of exhaustion hit him that brought him to his knees and made him pant heavily. "They're all done," the young prince wheezed but managed to send the Biju a victorious grin. The crimson fox just stared at the boy blankly, his giant red eyes blinking owlishly at the heaving child beneath him. "Why have you done this for me, human?" he asked after a long stretch of silence. "Why go to great lengths for a being that resents you?" The whiskered blonde was silent for a few moments, desperately trying to regain his breath, before he answered the bound beast. "Because that's my Tekashido, 5, my samurai way." Naruto said that with a face-splitting grin as his cerulean eyes shone with unwavering determination at his inner demon that was at least 50 times bigger than he. "And like I said before, you don't like me and I really don't like you, but we could learn to like each other if not tolerate." The Ninetales narrowed his red eyes at him, looking for any stray traces of deceit on his container's face. He was surprised to see that the oblivious blonde was glaring back at him even though he was being childish about it. The QB chuckled before he sent the boy a fox-like grin which greatly surprised and unnerved the blonde prince. It was surprising because he didn't know that a Biju like him could smile, and it was unnerving because of the way the fox's pristine giant white fangs glistened dangerously at him. "Alright brat, you passed my test." The QB's grin grew in amusement at the boy's fearful look. "I will provide you with my strength, and in exchange you will help me capture and kill a certain man who had controlled me as well as killed your parents many years ago, deal?" Naruto was a bit skeptical of the thought of killing a man, but it immediately washed away once the beast mentioned the guy killing his parents. That, he would not forgive. "Deal," Naruto replied tartly. The fox unsheathed one claw and held it out to the boy to shake. Naruto looked at it hesitantly before he reached out a tiny hand and grasped on the tip of the claw before both males bobbed their appendages up and down once. Flashback, Kai. Naruto's eyes narrowed at the mysterious man that Kurama had mentioned long ago. Kurama was the name of Kyubi no Yoko. How did he know, you ask? Well, ever since that day 3 years ago, Naruto has been frequently visiting Kurama through his mindscape that steadily built up their trust in each other. Most of the times Naruto would go see Kurama through the meditation room, but there were few times that he would be pulled into his mindscape at random, no matter where he was, to go speak to the fox. The reason why this was done very little was because of the boy's tetragrammed seal putting a heavy strain on the QB's influence on the whiskered Jinchuriki. But they both found another way to stay in touch by communicating through the young prince's thoughts. But anyway, let's go back to the matters at hand. I wonder what really happened that night, the boy thought curiously as he stared into the darkness of the meditation room. I feel as though something's not right with this whole situation. He blinked and suddenly found himself in the dimly light hallways of his imagination. He shrugged off his curiosity, figuring that it was no use dwelling on it when he could find out himself, and proceeded leisurely down the hallways of his mindscape. After a few minutes of wandering, Naruto stood in front of the doors that led to the powerful nine-tailed Biju. The young prince pushed open the heavy chamber doors, and was greeted by the sight of beautiful grassy fields with rivers, lakes, and frolicking woodland creatures. Naruto took in a deep breath before he grinned. "This is way better than it used to be," the boy said aloud and walked over to a riverbed where a beautifully handcrafted rowboat, decorated with maelstrom, orange, yellow, and red paint, with golden chiming bells, waited for him. The blonde carefully stepped inside before snapping his fingers, which made the rowboat float down the stream on command, needing no one to navigate it. The boat took him through rivers, big or small, which housed ecosystems of woodland and marine life. The animals would sometimes approach the boy in his boat before scurrying away to do what they were born, or imagined, to do. The little rowboat then took him through a giant lake that seemed to have no beginning or end, but beautifully glistened under the high noon sun. Fish of every kind, flying fish, carp, black bases, bass, even dolphin were housed in this giant lake, and many would hop out of the water to greet the boy with a splash or a chitter. Naruto seemed to smile at this but suddenly perked up once he noticed a small port approaching him at a steady pace. "Port Kitsune is now approaching. Port Kitsune is now approaching. Please keep all hands and feet inside of the boat until we reach our destination," the rowboat said soothingly in a feminine voice. "Yes," said. "It is Naruto's mind, people. He can dream up whatever he wants." "Enough said." Naruto grinned as the boat slid into port before it dinged twice to signify their arrival. "Thank you for riding the Boto no Hanashir, 6, and have a wonderful visit, Naruto-sama," the rowboat said as the boy slowly climbed out of it. "Thanks a bunch, Boto-chan, and I will." Naruto smiled, causing the boat to giggle before it dinged once and slowly floated back into the endless lake. The whiskered boy chuckled before he ran a hand through his spiky blonde hair. He couldn't explain how his mind worked. It just does whatever it wants to do. A/N. Again, it's Naruto, people. Whatever are we gonna do with our lovable idiot? N_N. The prince turned towards the large forestry that held humongous trees that reached to the normal height of reality, or reached 30 stories high and above. As he stepped towards the dense forest, stones began to erupt from under the ground that would help lead the boy to where he wanted to go. And after a few minutes of hopping from stone to stone, Naruto finally made it to the enclosure that housed Kurama. The enormous crimson fox was lying on a large bed of hay with his head resting on his crossed paws. But that wasn't all. There were 6 giant stone foxes about 3 stories high, which all held an orb and were positioned in an octahedron shape around the snoozing fox. It looked as if he was in the middle of a seal. Naruto sighed at his lazy partner before he went right up to the fox's face and patted his giant black nose. "Oh, Kurama! Wake up! Come on, wake up, I gotta talk to ya!" The giant fox sniffed before he slowly opened his enormous eyes and peered down his jailer with annoyance written all over his features. "What is it, boy? Can't you see that I was enjoying my slumber?" "I swear, you interrupt at the best times," Kurama grumbled grumpily and huffed through his nose, causing Naruto's hair to whip back at the sudden gust of breeze. "Gross, Kurama!" Naruto yelled as he coughed from the sudden gust of air. "My mouth was open and everything. Now I've got fox snot in my throat." The boy suddenly started to dry heave as if trying to empty his body from the nasty experience. The fox laughed heartily at the boy's expense, his laugh making the ground rumble. "Ha ha ha! That's what you get, you brat!" His laugh slowly diminished before his gaze turned serious. "So what is it that you want exactly? I know you're not here to pick a bone with me, I can sense your apprehensiveness in your chakra." The prince scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. "Heh. You noticed that, huh?" Naruto folded his arms before he began to explain. "Well then, all pleasantries aside, I need to talk to you about what we discussed on the day we first met 3 years ago. Ah yes, the incident that happened on the day of your birth." The QB shifted his position to make himself comfortable and grumbled when Naruto climbed up his nose and sat in the space in between his eyes, making himself comfortable for the long story. "Well, on that day, I wasn't in control of myself. A man by the name of Madara Uchiha interfered with your birth, and used me to cause the destruction of the Hidden Leaf Village." Flashback, Hajime. Kurama was put on edge as he could hear loud explosions happening outside of his jailer's seal. He writhed around on the table that he was chained to, desperately trying to break free. "Kushina!" he cried hoarsely, still weak from the earlier sealing process that was required of a female Jinchuriki giving birth. "What's going on out there? What's happened to the birthing process? Where's Minato?" The fox's ears perked up as he heard chuckling and heavy footsteps approaching him. Kurama groaned as he struggled to get his head up to look at the intruder. It was a man in a black cloak with a yellow mask that had jagged black stripes across it. He could see red eyes with 3 tomo, a telltale sign that this person was an Uchiha, flashing dimly in the darkness of the mindscape. "Who the hell are you?" The Biju yelled harshly at the figure, leaking large amounts of killer intent at the lone man. "What are you doing here?" The Uchiha chuckled yet again, ticking off the great fox. "My, you truly are a magnificent creature, as they say," the man praised in a disturbingly cool voice. "As for who I am, Kyubi, you can call me Madara Uchiha, and as for why I am here, that's simple really. I am here for you." Before Kurama could do anything else, he suddenly found his eyes locked with the Uchiha's Sharingan, and was sucked into a world of eternal darkness. Flashback, Kai. "And after I came to, the village was in shambles and I had already pierced your parents with my claw and was sealed into you by Minato's Fuinjutsu. Shiki Fujin, sealing technique, Reaper Death Seal." Kurama sighed and closed his eyes. "I am truly sorry, Naruto." Throughout the whole story, Naruto had been silent as he contemplated the Biju's horrific memories, and his frown deepened more and more of the almighty fox's captors' wrongdoings. The boy sighed before he propped himself up from his comfortable position. "It's okay, Kurama. I know it wasn't your fault." The blonde narrowed his eyes as his face contorted into a dangerous look. "But what this guy did to my parents and the village was unforgivable, and I will help you beat this guy even if it's the last thing I do." "That's a promise, Tibeo." The gargantuan fox smiled at the boy's antics with his 9 tails swishing appreciatively behind him. "I'll keep you to that, brat. Now get out of here, I hear your annoying uncle calling for you." The boy just grinned before he hopped off of the fox and waved goodbye. "See ya, Kurama," and the fox watched as the boy faded into nothingness before he yawned and resumed his mid-afternoon nap. Naruto blinked and found himself back in the meditation chamber with his uncle Akihiko waving to him from the beginning of the large seal. The whiskered child slowly stood up, ending the seal's whitish glow, and stretched his back before he quickly made his way over to the redhead. Akihiko was strangely wearing a mesh shirt that was covered by a black shirt, black expendable pants, and black sandals. The reason for the man's choice of wear being so unorthodox was because it wasn't traditional samurai wear. "Hey kiddo! Finished talking to that lazy-ass lump of fur?" Akihiko grinned as he ruffled up his nephew's already spiky hair. Naruto laughed, and heard Kurama growl in annoyance. "Yeah, though you really shouldn't call him that. He doesn't like it, you know?" The man rolled his eyes before taking out a cigar and putting it in his mouth. "Whatever, it's not like he can get me in the state that he's in now." Akihiko took out a lighter and lit his cigar and took in a deep breath before he spoke. "Come on, kiddo, we've got a meeting with Ma and Pa in the Royal Council room. One of these days, Akihiko, one of these days." Kurama screamed in the boy's mind, but Naruto ignored it as he raised a brow at his uncle. "What for Akihiko Ajizan?" the blonde asked curiously. He saw the ginger hesitate for a moment, which raised the boy's suspicion even higher. Akihiko Uzumaki? Hesitate? Those two words sounded so foreign together that it made the blonde blink olishly before he finally recognized the man's expression. What the hell's going on with Akihiko Ajisen? Naruto thought as he peered at the batosai with narrow blue eyes, further unnerving the man. I've never seen him so uncomfortable before. The only time I've ever seen him like this was when he pissed off Minami Nichin. Before the boy could further question the samurai, they had already arrived at the esteemed council room. Wordlessly, Akihiko slid open the door and walked inside with Naruto hot on his heels. They both stood in front of the large desk constructed out of cement with a banner with the Uzumaki clan's crest hanging proudly in the center of it. Ryu and Harumi were sitting in the two fanciest chairs with 7 other empty chairs on their either sides. They both looked at each other before they turned their attention to the young boy, their violet eyes somber. Naruto-kun, Ryu said gravely with his wife squeezing his hand reassuringly, we need to talk. The final bell rung in Konoha's Ninja Academy, signaling the end of the school day for all students. Children flooded out of the front doors and were greeted by their parents, and listened as their kids excitedly told them about their day at school. One girl by the name of Hinata Hyuga was waiting patiently for her escort to come and pick her up from the gate. She was in casual wear that consisted of brown capri pants, brown sandals, and a dark green, hoodless jacket with a fire symbol on the upper right side of her chest. The cuffs of the jacket were rolled up to the middle of her forearms, and the inside of the jacket was cream-colored. She also had a light lavender blouse underneath. Hinata-chan! Hinata-chan! A strangely feminine voice called out to her instead of the male voice that the little brunette was expecting. Hinata smiled happily as she saw her mother wave over to her with 2 escort guards accompanying her flanks. She was wearing a beautiful loose turquoise kimono with golden trims and edges and had beautifully intricate waves that designed the outsides of the kimono. She also had quite the bulging belly, hence her slow movements and loose kimono. Okasan! Okasan! Hinata beamed as she quickly ran up to the fairly plump woman and gave her gentle hug so as to not harm the delicate new life that was residing in the woman's womb. How was your day? Did you get plenty of rest? Is Hanabi-chan okay? Did you get plenty of food? Have you? Hinata-chan, slow down. Hitomi giggled at her daughter's worry. I'm fine. In fact, I should be asking you these questions, my little Usagi-chan. Hinata just pouted cutely and rubbed her mother's belly in a very possessive manner. I know, but you're going to be due to the hospital any moment now, and it's my job to make sure that you and Hanabi-chan are well taken care of. The shy heiress blinked as she felt a kick from within her mother's belly. Hanabi-chan just kicked. What do we do? Do why you need a Dr. Okasan? Hitomi just giggled in amusement as the eldest daughter started fret exaggeratedly over her mother's health, and the escorts desperately trying to calm the little brunette down. She winced as she felt her youngest daughter kick in her womb once more, which made the matriarch beam with happiness. I can tell that you will be a strong fighter just like your father, Hanabi-chan, Hitomi thought before she finally calmed Hinata down and guided her back to the safety of the Hyuga compound. Hitomi watched her daughter whistle a happy little tune before she turned her attention to the sky by a suddenly squawk. A hawk squawked loudly with a little white note attached to its leg, and the woman frowned as it flew towards the same direction that the Hyuga were headed. The woman sighed before her eyes steeled with resolve. It's time. Hinata huffed heavily before she regained the Hyuga's jukin, gentle fist, stance and eyed her father wearily, looking for any openings that he may have let show. Hayashi narrowed his pale eyes with his veins becoming more pronounced, the telltale sign of the Byakugan being active, before he quickly went on the offensive. Hayashi sent multiple quick jabs only for the girl to expertly block them all before she sent 2 jabs at her father's abdomen. They weren't using any chakra, for they were only having sparring match. Hayashi winced at the contact but was very good at hiding his discomfort. In retaliation of his daughter's attacks, he caught her arm that was trying to send an open palm to his chest and sent multiple jabs along her sternum and pectoral muscle. Hinata wheezed and slumped to the ground, groaning as she tried to get back up. Seeing his daughter struggle, Hayashi let his guard down and slipped his hands into his sleeves. That's enough training for today, Hinata. The man deactivated his bloodline before sending his daughter a proud smile. Despite having multiple flaws in your stance and leaving me many openings to take advantage of, you did fairly well today. Good work. The shy heiress was discouraged at first but instantly brightened at her father's praise. With determination spurring her on, Hinata forced herself on her feet, greatly surprising her father, and gave the Hyuga clan head a humble bow. Thank you very much for your kindness, Otosin. Hinata replied. Hayashi smiled and nodded before guiding his now confused daughter out of the dojo. Come now, Hinata-chan, your mother and I have much to discuss with you this day. I am getting married? Hinata squeaked in a quiet and very distraught voice. Her father had led her to his office where her mother was currently seating in the leather rolling chair that Hayashi usually occupied. The office was very Western looking with bookshelf filled to the brim with books and scrolls about the Hyuga's ancestry and secret jutsu and katas. The desk was crafted out of dark oak and had paperwork neatly stacked at the top right corner of it. Hitomi and Hayashi exchanged a look of worry before they turned their attention back to their unhappy and heartbroken daughter. Hitomi slowly stood up from the seat and with the help of Hayashi, waddled over to the smaller brunette, and knelt in front of her. The temporarily plump woman used her slender fingers to caress her daughter's cheek fondly. "Hinata-chan, I know that you're young, so very young, to be in this situation, but you must understand that we did this for the good of the clan and most importantly, for your safety." Hitomi saw tears stray away from the heiress's lavender pools and it made the woman's heart ache at the sight. She wiped them away with her thumbs before she spoke once again. "Years ago we signed a contract with the newly reformed Uzumaki clan of your betrothal to the youngest heir, Naruto Uzumaki. This wedding between you and him will still a war that was soon going to break out between Konohagakure no Sato and Yuzushiogakure no Sato." Hinata tried to hold back her sobs but couldn't. She wiped her eyes furiously as if it would stop her constant streams of tears flowing from her eyes. It's not fair," the hurt girl wailed. It's just not fair. I really wanted to be the clan head one day and now I won't. It's not fair." Hayashi too felt his heart ache at the sight of his eldest daughter suffering, but he learned how to control his emotions much better than his wife did. Hayashi took one of the small girl's hands into his own as he gazed at her softly, tenderly. "I know that it's not fair, Hinata-chan, but you must understand that your sacrifice will bring much more happiness to others." When the man saw that his words weren't quite getting to her, he tried a different approach. "Think about what you're doing for Hanabi. You do love your sister, yes?" The small brunette nodded vigorously, and looked up at the man with puffy lavender eyes. "Well," Hayashi began, "if you marry this boy then you will be saving her from being marked by the caged bird seal. Your sacrifice will give Hanabi immense happiness, think about it." The former heiress's sobs slowly diminished as she thought about the pros of her betrothal to this Naruto boy. She wiped her nose before she smiled at the thought of Hanabi being born into the world without having to be cursed by that atrocious seal that had befallen amongst many Hyuga in the clan. She gave her parents a weak smile with her mind made up. "Okay, I'll do it for Hanabi-chan and F for the G-good of the clan," and with that, she slowly stood up and gently twisted her hands from her mother's and father's grasps before wordlessly leaving the office and staggered in silence to her room. Hitomi shakily stood up to follow her but was held back by her husband. She was about to protest but fell silent when he shook his head. "Give her time to heal, Hitomi-chan," the head said somberly, taking in a very heavy responsibility such as this demands time to contemplate on what must be done. Hitomi sighed and looked back to where her daughter once sat. "I hope you're right, Hayashi-kun, I really hope so. Back in the land of Eddie A/N, it's Whirlpool/Yuzushiogakure no Sato guys. Sometimes I'll alternate between the three. Sorry if you become confused." N/N, Naruto had also received the news that he was being betrothed to Hinata and was in the Uzumaki royal stables brushing his horse Akira with anger and betrayal clouding his mind. "I can't believe they did this to me." Naruto screamed and brushed a particularly rough stroke across the orange horse's fur, causing him to neigh in protest and buck at his master's harsh ministrations. Akira had grown significantly in the last 4 years and was now 147 meters tall, A/N. He's 48 now, and his mane had grown longer as well as his tail. Over the years, Naruto and Akira had forged a close bond with each other, and the boy would always ride the horse whenever he felt trouble, frustrated, angered, or confused about things. "Oh, sorry boy," the blonde prince apologized by giving the oddly orange horse a pat on his hind to show his regret of his anger overtaking him. Akira grunted and Naruto resumed his brushing and his rant. "I mean, they could have told me this before they signed that marriage contract with the Hyuga clan, but what do they do instead? They sign it anyway and leave me with a huge burden of marrying some girl that I don't know in order to stop a feuding war between us and Konoha." Akira just sent him a look that clearly said, "If they did tell you, you wouldn't have agreed anyway." "Of course I wouldn't have!" Naruto screamed at his animal companion, completely stopping his brushing so as to dramatically wave his arms around. "I'm too freaking young to be married. I'm only 8 years old for Kami's sake. Ryojiji and Hirumiyabukin and Akihiko Ajisen are being unfair." Akira had one eye that was narrowed as if he was raising an imaginary brow at his master. "Are you seriously complaining about this?" he seemed to say. "You're the next in line to become the daimyo of Yuzushiogakure no Sato, Naruto. You will have to make sacrifices for the greater good of the people." Naruto sighed and started to brush Akira's coat softly. "I guess you're right, Akira. After all, that is my Tekashido, my samurai way. It's just," the blonde ran his fingers through his spiky hair as he sighed again, "I just don't know what to do when she comes here in 3 days. I'm praying to Kami-sama that she isn't those snobby rich girls because I really dislike people like them. I don't want to be in a loveless marriage. Even I have standards if my choices ever came around girls." Akira snorted and shook his mane out before giving Naruto a glance. "Don't worry," his look seemed to say, "your grandparents may be old, but they are most definitely not senile. They know what they're doing with this marriage and only want the best for you." He then gave the distraught boy a lick that brought a grin to the blonde's face. All right, Akira." The boy laughed as he pushed about the horse's snout away from his whiskered face. "Thanks for cheering me up. And even though I may not like this whole marriage thing, I might as well give it a shot. Who knows, maybe my soon-to-be wife will be nice." Naruto picked up Akira's saddle that was hanging on his stable's door and firmly secured it on the horse's back and stuck in the cylinder part of his reins in his mouth. The blonde grunted as he heaved himself up on the orange stallion's back and took a hold of his reins. How about a ride around Yuzushio, any Akira? The horse just neighed before rearing up in excitement. The Jinchuriki just laughed in response. I'll take that as a yes. Hiya! And the boy snapped the reins, causing the horse to take off towards the village with his hooves thundering loudly as he did so. Hinata stared at herself in the mirror with a stern expression on her face as she finished applying her kanzashi, traditional Japanese hair ornaments, 7, into her hair. She was wearing a beautiful amber kimono that was made entirely out of pure silk and was a gift from the Uzumaki clan. Small orange maelstrom decorated it with orange petals imprinted on the dark red sash and fringes. The Hyuga clan's insignia was sewn on the left shoulder, while the Uzumaki clan's was on the right, and also wore pristine white socks with her new stylish wooden sandals. The bluinette sighed before she brushed a hand atop of her kanzashi. The kanzashi was decorated with marigold flowers that made the 8-year-old giggle. Well, whoever this Naruto character is, he must really like orange. She suddenly jumped when she heard a light rapping on her door. It took a moment for her to calm her heart before she addressed the person. "See, come in." The door slowly slid open and there appeared was a man with short brown hair and backwards spikes sitting respectfully on his knees. He had featureless white eyes like the other Hyuga in the compound, with the exception of Hinata and Hitomi, and his nose was broad and well-defined. He wore the standard Konoha shinobi uniform which included a green flak jacket, dark pants, and a forehead protector that he wore like a bandana. His name was Hyuga and he was Hinata's personal escort. Most of the times the former heiress viewed the Chunin as an older brother that she never had and would often call him Konizan, though she would have to refer to him as so in secrecy so as to not let the Hyuga elders punish the man with the caged bird seal. "Lady Hinata-sama," Ko addressed humbly and bowed low to the girl with his forehead touching the floor. "It is time for us to depart for Yuzushiogaku no Sato. Are you ready?" Hinata inhaled and looked at the mirror one last time before a determined expression adored her face. She looked at Ko and gave him a nod. "Hi Konizan, let's go." Hinata sat on her knees daintily in the carriage that she was currently being escorted in. Her poise was straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap, and her face was written with nervousness. Her mind kept buzzing a million miles a minute as she thought of her betrothed. Would he like her? Would she like him? What was his family like? Was his family a ninja clan? If they weren't, did they have an off chance of practicing jutsu as well? Hinata sighed and squeaked in surprise when the carriage suddenly jerked to a stop, signaling their arrival. The young brunette reached out a tentative hand towards the curtains and pulled it wide enough to poke her head through as she felt the carriage being lowered. "Ayano, is everything alright out there?" she asked softly to a guard that was stationed to carry her carriage. "Oh, do not worry, Lady Hinata-sama," the branch member assured. "We are at a temporary stop until the captain of the vessel says that it is clear to board. Until then, please remain in your carriage." The mouse sighed in relief with a hand pressed tenaciously to her chest, but then perked up in curiosity. Is it alright for me to have a look at the ship?" she asked. The guard smiled before giving her a nod. "Of course, but please look from inside the carriage. Your safety comes first, Hinata-sama, so please bear with it a little longer." The small girl just nodded and pushed back the red, thickly woven curtain as far back as she could. She gasped in awe at the large vessel that would be taking her across vast seas to Yuzushiogaku no Sato. It was vastly great in size and was built with softwood with multiple internal compartments that was accessed by separate hatches and ladders. Its hull was horseshoe-shaped with the stern supporting the high poop deck. The bottom was flat with no keel and had a very large rudder that seemed to help prevent the boat from slipping sideways in the water. The sails puffed out proudly as the wind barreled against it, making the Uzumaki crest expand out larger than it ever was. Amazing, Hinata breathed, her pale lavender eyes sparkling with awe. "The Uzumaki clan truly is amazing, the guard from earlier said as he noted the former heiress's awe. "They are the most influential clan in the elemental nations and hold great power over even some daimyo in other lands. They are not only famous in the political and economic arts, but they also specialize in fighting attributes of both shinobi and samurai ways, though they quite frankly prefer the traditional samurai ways than we shinobi." Hinata smiled widely in relief. She could still have a chance of continuing her ninja career, and maybe, just maybe, she could help out the Hyuga clan from their corrupted ways even though she would be marrying out of the family soon. "All aboard! All aboard! The passengers going to Yuzushiogaku no Sato, please board now. The ship will be leaving momentarily." A sailor called before he quickly bounded down the walkway and helped the other sailors load the provisions for the long trip ahead. "Lady Hinata-sama," the branch member called, "please return inside. We are about to board the boat." The girl just nodded and quickly closed the curtains as the carriage was once again hoisted up. The Hyugas boarded the ship and the vessel soon took off not too long after, leaving the brunette to ponder what awaited her in the land of Eddie. Next time on the Lost Clan of Whirlpool, husband and wife meet at last, the lost sword of the Rikudo Sennin? What if Naruto has kurama progenitor bloodline? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.